Welcome everybody. We're about to start our EBCE board meeting for the month of June. We're letting people filter into the attendees queue, so we'll wait a little bit so people can filter in and not miss anything. Takes a little time to do that. Okay, I think we're good for now.
I haven't seen anyone in the attendee area as of yet.
Okay. Thank you all. Welcome everybody to the June monthly board of the East Bay Community Energy Authority. Appreciate very much that everyone's here. I also want to always share my appreciation, our collective appreciation for the good hard work that the EBCE staff do, some of whom attend these meetings, obviously, and share information. Also want to express my appreciation and our collective appreciation to all the Community Advisory Committee members and all the advocates and advocacy group representatives who attend some or all of our meetings and provide us with important information between meetings, and really no agency can really function without outside kind of oversight, keeping us on our toes and reminding us of things that we need to do. So with that, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Yes. Member Valle. Member Valle. Member Valle. Director Tiedemann.
Here.
Director Harrison.
Here.
Director Hernandez.
Here.
Director Mai. Director Mai. Director Marquez.
Yeah.
Director Kick.
Here.
Director Hannon.
Here.
Director McCarthy. Actually, I should be saying Pleasanton.
Here.
San Leandro.
Present.
Tracy. Union City.
Here.
Community Advisory Committee.
Present.
Emeryville.
Here.
Oakland.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it very much. There may be one or two other board members who are running a little bit late. Obviously, everybody is very busy. I think I did mention that Dan Ariola from Tracy, Councilmember Ariola, will not be here for family medical reasons, so he's excused. And I think you also mentioned, Mr. Clerk, that Director McCarthy from City of Piedmont is unable to make it today.
Actually, and I also wanted to add, this is Teresa Cox. I'm on the phone line in Commute that I'm attending the meeting for Fremont.
Thank you, Councilmember Cox. Thanks for being here today representing the City of Fremont. And Diane?
I just wanted to let the clerk know that Supervisor Valle is in the attendees list. He's got his hand raised, so if you could promote him to join us.
Oh, that'd be great.
Sporting $65.
Promote. He gets a promotion. All right.
I was like, that in the roll. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome, Supervisor Valle. Okay. So we've taken roll, and as you said, we have a quorum, Mr. Clerk. So appreciate that, and we're going to move to our public comment. This is time for members of the public to give us brief public comment, up to 2 minutes for items that may be of interest to EBCE, but are not specifically on tonight's agenda. So, Mr. Clerk, we could open up the hand raise for public comment.
Sure. Yes. The first 3 speakers for public comment, Edward Dejau, Jessica Tovar, and Alita Dupree. I am unmuting Edward Dejau now for 3 minutes.
We're going to do 2 minutes tonight.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
going to recognize Jessica Tovar for 2 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I just want to bring to your attention that yesterday was the National Day of Action to Cancel Utility Debt. Had many folks attend that. California has officially reached $2 billion of utility debt related to COVID, meaning that a lot of folks are in extreme debt since March of last year and have accumulated a lot of debt. And it's not just electricity, but the gas, the broadband, the water, on top of folks that are behind on rent. This is a racial justice, an ethical issue. So I want to highlight that because the moratorium on shutoffs is ending the 30th of this month. That means come July, they would be instituting power shutoffs and shutoffs of other utilities. So I just want to highlight this because it's such a dire problem. And I would like to request that East Bay Community Energy take a stand to communicate to the CPUC that this needs to be addressed. We need an extension on the moratorium until a decision can be made to rectify this issue and alleviate the debt. And this, just to highlight again, this is a national issue. But as far as California is concerned, the moratorium is lifting in less than 2 weeks. People are terrified. So I really am asking for you to take action in communicating with the CPUC that this is an important issue, that they need to extend the moratorium and come to some kind of decision where folks who are hundreds of dollars worth of debt right now can be relieved of that. The pandemic was an awful experience. We've been through enough. And, you know, there's a lot of grief attached to that. We don't need any more. Thank you.
Alita Dupree, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Dan Kalb, and members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. Always good to be back with you. Where I'm sitting right now, it's extremely hot. I think it's about 115 degrees. And I have the air conditioning going, and I'm using a lot of electricity, 40 to 45 kilowatt hours per day. But really, it's the grand scheme of things, it's not that much, because I think the New York City subway would use my annual usage in about 4 minutes. So it just shows the scope of EBC is big business. And I say that in a good way. So how do we ensure that we keep the lights on affordably to be able to hedge our electricity purchases? And to promote the idea of time of use, I am not doing any cooking right now. It's too hot. I did it earlier in the day so that the AC does not have to work so hard, because I want to be comfortable in my home. Hence the importance of using electricity efficiently and in a way that is empowering, so I can achieve my goals. And so I think EBCE has to be not just a seller passing through kilowatt hours, but an empowering organization to help people to achieve their goals. And we're doing that through the various local development programs, such as kitchen electrification, because it's not good to be breathing in all those emissions. I'd like to see a cigarette equivalent on what people are breathing in when they're working in kitchens and restaurants with gas stoves. Certainly electric vehicle charging, solar and storage, and I would hope someday that EBCE would become a municipal utility district, so we can control the delivery and managing the lines and transmission, all kinds of good things. Thank you.
Yes. We have one more speaker, Edward Jajau. Edward Jajau, if you're calling in, could you please use the raise hand feature so I can allow you to speak? Not seeing any raised hands. That was the last speaker for public comment.
Let's see, is raising hand on the phone, is that *6?
*6.
Actually, *9.
*9, okay. One of those star things. If anybody is still waiting to speak, they could raise their hand that way or show us. Looks like that is not happening. Okay. Well, there'll be additional opportunities to speak after, during, or before each agenda item. So thank you again all for being here. And we're going to move on with the next item on the agenda. And the next item on the agenda is elections of chair and vice chair. Let me just say that I think most of us here have been on, or certainly are aware of, all the different joint powers authorities that we have and commissions that we have in the county and the region. And usually a chair or the officers have one-year terms, and then they rotate to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And that's fine. We've developed an informal tradition here for the chair, the chair and vice chair to be in those positions for 2 years, while we still would have a 1-year revote by the board as necessary to fulfill that. So it's not a required tradition, but I think it has been a helpful tradition, and I hope we carry it forward over the next 2 years. But that's an option for this board to decide now or a year from now. I also wanted to say that we'll be entertaining a motion shortly for our new chair, and the motion should include the person's name, of course, and that the motion will be for a new chair for the next year and effective July 1st of 2021. I'd like to start a tradition to elect our officers in the June meeting and have them start being an officer on July 1st, concurrent with the fiscal year. I think that's a good tradition to have. So that said, I'm going to entertain now any hands raised for those who want to nominate anybody for the position of chair for EBCE. I'm seeing, let's see here, looking for a hand raise. I see a hand raise from Kate Harrison.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Dan Kalb to be chair for this next year.
No, I'm going to have to decline. I'm sorry.
I didn't know that.
I don't have to.
I didn't coordinate with you clearly.
Sorry, I don't have to decline, but I've been chair for 2 years already,
Right.
which you, Kate, probably weren't aware of.
No, I was not.
No, so thank you for that. But I've been chair for 2 years, so I hope we follow our tradition of having our vice chair move up to chair.
Oh, good.
So let's see, does Mayor Hernandez or Councilmember Hannon? Councilmember Hannon has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I nominate Diane Martinez for board chair.
Okay.
Second.
And who was that, who second?
That was Harrison.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that very much. I could not think of anybody better in the entire East Bay to take over as chair of this wonderful agency, and I really mean that. Are there any other nominations for the position of chair? Seeing none, we'll close the nominations. And since we're all remote, we must have a roll call vote. Diane, do you wish to say anything?
I will gladly accept the nomination. I'm very honored to accept the nomination. And I just wanted to say that the agency would not be in such a good position if it weren't for your leadership, Dan, and for Scott Haggerty's before you. And I think the fact that you both have served 2-year terms has really provided some continuity for staff and for the board, especially since we've had some turnover in our membership. So it's really, really great that we've had your foundational knowledge as you were a member of the steering committee for an extensive time before 2017 when the agency was formed. So I just want to thank you for your service and compliment you on your competency as chair. And you run a great meeting, so it's big shoes to fill, and I appreciate your vote of confidence, but I suppose there's still an actual vote to take. And do we need to take public comment?
Good question. Yes, I believe we do. Why don't we're going to vote in a moment, but since we're going to take public comment, I'm going to also, on a separate question, entertain motions for vice chair, and I want to call on Supervisor Richard Valle for that first. Supervisor Valle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing my hand.
Yes, please.
I'd like to nominate Councilmember Karina Lopez, who has not only attended Princeton, but UC Berkeley, and is the first Latinx person to be elected to City Council in the history of San Leandro, and was also revered by Attorney General Rob Bonta for an award in 2017.
Excellent. And Mayor Martinez from Emeryville is seconding that nomination.
Yep.
And I see Councilmember Lopez has her hand raised, but before I call on her, I think that's an excellent nomination, but I want to also, as a matter of process, invite other nominations just to see if there are any other hands raised. Not seeing any at this point, so I'm going to invite Councilmember Lopez from San Leandro to say a few words.
Thank you very much for the nomination. I do accept the nomination, and presuming that the vote is in the affirmative, I want to thank everybody here. I've been with this EBCE since the very beginning when it was still an idea, and I'm really proud of where the organization is now. Thanks to everybody who participates. I look forward to being of service and working with the presumptive chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as the clerk reminded us, we now would be a time for public comment on the nominations item for chair and vice chair.
There is no one signed up for public comment for this item.
Oh, I thought I saw a hand raised. Let's see.
That was a hand raised from prior.
Oh, I see one now.
See one now. Leader Dupree, I'm recognizing you for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Dan Calvin, members. Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. So I'm supportive and excited. I haven't gotten to know y'all real well, but I do spend a lot of time in Emeryville and in the Bay Area. I stay in part of Oakland that is near Emeryville. So Emeryville is a place that I enjoy and spend a lot of time in, as well as Oakland and all the other various places in the East Bay. But I've always been enjoyed and encouraged with Vice Chair Martinez's questions and examining of the material that is presented before you in these agendas. So given that, I believe that these two nominations are eminently qualified to lead this agency for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands raised in the attendee queue. So, and any other comments from board members? Not seeing any hands raised there. I believe, Madam General Counsel, can we vote on these together, or do we have to have separate votes for each?
No, you can go ahead and vote on them together. Absolutely.
Okay, so with the concurrence of the makers of the motions, we're going to combine them and vote together. So do the makers of the motions all concur on that? Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up here from everybody. I understand that's a yes. So we will have one roll call vote for both the chair and vice chair as nominated.
Great, thank you. Alameda County. Alameda County.
Aye, thank you.
Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley.
Yes.
Dublin.
Yes.
Fremont. Fremont. We'll come back to Fremont. Hayward.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay, thank
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes. Hayward.
Yes.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Yes.
Piedmont. Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro.
Yes.
Tracy. Union City.
Yes.
Emeryville.
Yes.
Oh, and Oakland.
Aye.
Pass unanimously.
Okay, congratulations to Director Martinez and Director Lopez. You have a lot of work ahead of you, as we all do. Hey, we can all clap. All right, thank you both for stepping up and for continuing your work with EBCE and of course in your respective cities, obviously. And effective July 1st, you'll be the chair and vice chair, and we'll go from there. So we're going to move on to the rest of the meeting. I do want to just thank the organization for allowing me to be chair for the past 2 years and vice chair prior to that. I really appreciate the vote of confidence, and I very much am thrilled to be part of this wonderful agency. And I'll obviously continue to be on the board for the time being, and do it all of us, as all of us will do what we can to move us forward with a clean energy future for Alameda County and Tracy and beyond. So that's it. Let's see here. Now I must find the agenda. Where's the agenda? Okay, next is our consent agenda. And I will take it upon myself to move item 9 from consent to non-consent. And so we'll hear item 9 between items 12 and 13 tonight. And so the consent agenda, so now I'll ask anybody if anybody else has any desire to move any other consent item from consent to non-consent. If so, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Now would be the time then to make any comments or ask any brief questions on any items that are on the consent agenda. And again, looking for hands. Don't see any hands yet. So while people might be thinking of questions, if any, we'll go to the public comment attendees list for items on the consent agenda other than item 9, which is now on non-consent.
There's no one signed up for public comment for the consent agenda.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any hands there. Okay, and I now see Councilmember Hannon from Newark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Hanna from Newark to move the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
Okay,
From Pleasanton.
okay, thank you, Councilmember Hannon and Councilmember Narum, for motion and seconding to that. And just as one FYI, many people are probably aware of the status of AB 1139, that extremely problematic bill that would harm much of the rooftop solar industry. That bill was essentially held, or kind of died, not really, in the assembly. It is not moving forward this year. However, it could come back next year, since it technically could be a 2-year bill. And we also know that sometimes things that are in bills get re-put in gut and amend bills later, even in the same year. That could theoretically happen. So I would ask staff to consider our opposition to this as opposition, even if the bill number changes. And I think that's understood. And with that, I see no other hands raised. So we'll now take a roll call vote on the consent agenda.
Great. Alameda County.
Aye.
Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley.
Yes.
Dublin.
Yes.
Fremont. Fremont. I'll come back to Fremont. Hayward.
Yes.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Aye.
Piedmont. Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro.
Yes.
Tracy. Union City.
Yes.
Emeryville.
Aye.
And Oakland.
Aye.
The consent agenda passes.
Fremont, yes.
And Fremont's a yes on that. Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll now move on to our next agenda item, which is the CEO report and the items under the CEO report. Nick?
So for the CEO report, mostly just sharing some of the meetings that we've held. So we held an executive committee meeting on May 28th, mostly focused on our budget and discussion of our legislative program. There was also some discussion of our energy resilient public facility program, our program to develop resiliency hubs across Alameda County. We did not have a finance and admin committee since our last meeting, but our next one is scheduled for June 9th. Oh, will be held on June 9th. We did not hold one on June 9th. So I'm not sure, Adrian, if you recall when our next one is held, just, feel free to remind me. We do have a marketing committee planned for August 5th. We have been continuing to hold our special board retreats. So our last one was for public policy. We focused on sort of the constellation of regulatory initiatives and legislative initiatives that we're working on. We have one more of those that is scheduled for July, focused on marketing activities. And we did have a closed session discuss real property negotiations last week. I don't have anything else in my CEO report though.
And that the finance meeting is on July 9th.
Yeah, July 9th. That's what I thought. Yeah.
There we go. Thank you very much. A short to the point CEO report. First, are there any questions or comments to our CEO on anything in his report or anything that relates to any of the items in the report from board members or from the Community Advisory Committee, of course? I'm not seeing any hand raised. Maybe while people are thinking about that. Mr. Clerk, any public comment, folks who are here to comment on this item?
There is no one signed up to speak to this item.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So this is an informational item, so no vote is necessary. So we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is the Community Advisory Committee report. And Mary, I believe you're here tonight.
Yep, I am. Evening, folks. I just wanted to let everybody know that we have a full complement, almost a full complement for the CAC now. We have 10 members that are sworn in, and we had almost everybody there on Monday, which is great. We still need 2 more at-large seats that are going to be determined from the mayor's conference. And I'm working with staff, Alex, on this, and he may be in touch with the relevant folks to try and figure out how to make this happen. But there are 2 seats that are still to be filled on the CAC. But it was fun to have a much larger group last Monday. And worked out great. The other thing is the CAC heard about debt relief and the Connected Communities debt management efforts on Monday. There was some discussion on it. It ended up being pretty late in the meeting, and so we didn't have a whole lot of talk, and there's no action but from the CAC on that. But just to let you know that we did hear about that during our meeting. And that's it for this month.
Thank you. While board members may be thinking of some questions to ask, I did have one. You mentioned, thanks for reminding all of us, that the Conference of Mayors, Alameda County Conference of Mayors, is being asked, by the way, the mayor of Tracy should be invited to that, is being asked to fill those last 2 slots, at-large slots. Are they being, this is to Nick as well as to Mary, are they being given some of the names of other members who were asked to be considered for the geographic slots and maybe were ranked among the, close to the top, but not quite enough to get that slot, and now might be thought of as under consideration by the Conference of Mayors? Did I just say that in an articulate way?
That is our intention. Our intention is not to go out to seek new applicants, but to take the applications that we have. And I think we're not going to say, because we didn't rank any of the applicants, so I wouldn't say that there's a value judgment there. I think we just have a pool of applicants who were not selected, and that is the pool of applicants which we would start with. And I think the question of the Council of Mayors is, would you like EBCE staff to make a recommendation, or would you like to name a group that will do your own review? And that's something we will leave to the Council of Mayors to recommend to us.
Great. Okay.
So the other thing I would mention then is also include in there the alternates. The people who are currently sitting as alternates right now, I don't know, because that would give them an opportunity to actually be on the board, the CAC full time. That would mean we're without alternates, but we could deal with that. But consider that and whether or not you think that's a viable.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess the question I have is, if we do that and we lose an alternate and we didn't have an alternate from, that area, and suddenly we don't. So it's an interesting question, kind of a
Yeah, and I think some areas had more applications, and certain areas only had the set number of applications, and you filled it, and that was it. There wasn't anybody else. So I haven't taken a look. I don't know where all the applications came from, but consider that.
Maybe it's worth asking the alternates if any of them have an interest in, kind of having themselves considered for those positions, because there may be alternates who say, I'd rather be an alternate.
Yep.
So that might be worth just kind of, and then once we have them, then we can have that total. We have 2 alternates that are interested in the at-large position, and there's 7 applicants who applied and didn't get it. And then there's a pool that we can take to the Council of Mayors.
Yeah, I think that works. I think that needs to come, that communication should probably come from Alex. I think he's been the one spearheading, so he should be the one contacting the alternates.
Thank you. Councilmember Harrison.
Yeah, I think I'd be more comfortable with the executive committee making recommendations or not making any recommendations and having the staff do it. And I'd feel better about that, I think.
I think here it's the Council of Mayors that's going to make the recommendation. I don't know if they have an executive committee or not.
They do.
Do they?
Okay,
They'll
so
look
the
at the
Council of Mayors
process,
executive committee.
and then it comes to the entire mayor's council.
So I think that's going to be the question for them, right? Is whether they want to do it or have staff do it.
Fortunately, some of our very board members here are also mayors, and so at least a few of them will be there as well. So there is some information that can be shared, so that they're not all, what do we do? And so I feel confident that we'll end up a pretty good solution. Okay.
Can I ask one more question? I can't remember
Yes.
on the application if we gathered information and data about who these people might represent, not just geographically. Because I know there was discussion about at one point, do we have the right people, not just where they're located, but the constituents that they represent? Do we have enough people, for example, on environmental and social justice, on the CAC, or are any of the people that didn't make it folks that would be able to bring that voice into the CAC, or other issues as well? That's just one that I was thinking about. But I know that there were other parameters that at one point had been more important than the geographic area that we're talking about now. So that is another thing, if that's available, to perhaps bring forward to the Council of Mayors for their consideration as well.
Those factors are in the app. So all those factors are in the applications.
Okay.
So the information is all there, right? Because we didn't modify the previous applications. We just set sort of a more clear kind of rank parameter around the area, the zone. Well,
yeah, no, I'm very supportive of that. I was just thinking we have these 2 at large. Maybe they could be somebody that.
Yeah. But my point is, the information is there for them to do it.
Okay.
It's not like we have to go and collect more information.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Can we hear public comment on this agenda item?
There's no one signed up for public comment for this item.
Okay. Actually, I see the hand raised just now.
Okay, I'm recognizing Jessica Tovar for 2 minutes.
Hi, Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. There has not been a community member on the Community Advisory Committee that I recall from the Livermore area. So that is one thing. And I do know that there is somebody from Livermore who applied every time this application process has opened and has not ever heard from you all. And so that brings up two things. Well, we definitely need a representative from Livermore. I would encourage that. The second thing is that there needs to be communication with folks who apply, whether they're selected or not. Even just an acknowledgement of the application in the timeline, and letting people know we're sorry we didn't choose you. However, we're holding on to your application in case we need to select folks again. I think that communication would be very appreciated. And again, I know somebody who's applied several times and they are very upset that they not only didn't get selected, but they never actually got any communication. So I just wanted to share that. And the last time there were Livermore representatives was for the steering committee before the JPA was set in place. So I just wanted to add that as well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That's a good point. Nick, could you make sure that those who are not chosen, someone on staff kind of gets back to them so they're not left in.
Let me confirm. I believe we may have had some of those communications, but I couldn't tell with 100% certainty. So let me reach out to my staff to see.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Kick from Livermore.
I just wanted to thank Jessica for bringing that up. And this just reminds me that when we were looking at who we chose for our region, Director Narum and Director Hernandez and I were choosing one person for the 3 cities. And so it might be something to consider as we move forward. What does representation look like? Do we have one person from each city? Or do we lump ourselves into regions? So I understand that Livermore is missing some representation, and I'm hoping to be that person. And even if we don't have someone on the CAC. So thanks for bringing that up, Jessica. And then I would also second to Nick, if it was us, if it was Kathy, Melissa, and I who were supposed to be the ones following up, please let us know, and then we can also do that following up. So
no,
okay.
that was certainly our follow-up.
Okay, good. Thank you for that.
And let's see, Councilmember Hannan and then Mayor Hernandez.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take 1 minute to, again, thank Mary Sutter for all the hard work she does representing the community. She does this as a volunteer. She brought to our attention the need for additional members for the community board. We took the situation seriously and made sure we discussed and encouraged folks that were qualified that would represent our communities well to participate. And I'm really pleased to hear that we're up to 10 members. But I want to thank Mary for her leadership. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Mayor Hernandez.
I will echo what Mike Hammond said. No, absolutely. Thank you, Mary. I know I have been on here for a few years, but get back to the Tri-Valley area. We looked at, I believe we only had 3 applicants. So, we had conversations about it. So you may want to have the person email us to see who that person is, Jessica, so that we can look into it. But definitely agree on getting a letter out of regret. And, I know that's what we do immediately when we don't select any of the people that actually turn in their application. So thank you.
Oh, and just a point of, there were 2 members appointed from the Tri-Valley. There was a member and an alternate. Yeah, and I can pull up how many applicants were, and I can share that later on.
Okay, thank you. And this is informational item, no action needed by the board. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So we're gonna move on to what was item 9 from the consent calendar now on non-consent. So Nick, who's presenting on this?
Marie.
Marie, I don't know if did Marie join? I think because I got pulled from consent, did she jump on or not?
She should be on. I know that she was planning to. She is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi. Sorry about that. And sorry about the confusion around consent versus regular agenda. Adrian, will you move the slides forward when I tell you to? Okay, great. Thank you. I'm here today to ask for the board's approval to complete negotiations and then execute 2 long-term contracts that are coming out of EBCE's 2020 long-term renewable energy and energy storage request for offers, or RFO. We released this RFO to the market in November of 2020. Some of the goals of the RFO were to make sure that EBCE is contracting with enough renewable energy generating resources to meet the RPS requirements, including the sub-requirement that we have long-term contracts, to make sure that EBCE is meeting our requirements to have enough capacity in the CAISO system, with those requirements specifically defined through the integrated resource plans near-term and mid-term reliability orders that were released by the Public Utilities Commission, and to contract with resources that will provide low-cost energy hedges, thereby helping protect our customers from price fluctuation in the CAISO markets. Although we went to market looking for resources inside or outside California that could deliver energy to the CAISO, we did also hope to find projects in Alameda County, and we told the market about our preference for in-county resources. We looked for resources that were a minimum of 10 megawatts in nameplate capacity and a maximum of 200 megawatts. The eligible online dates for these projects would be 2021 through 2024, with the idea being that we will release supplemental RFOs for projects that can come online after 2024 in future years. And the eligible contract lengths would be between 5 and 20 years long. Next slide, please. The RFO was released and went to an extensive list of developers and market participants. In early 2021, we received offers for over 70 projects that were solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, and energy storage. These projects were in 6 different states, but most of them were in California. Only 2 of the offers we received were in EBCE's service territory. One of those projects we deemed too speculative to shortlist. It was too speculative because it did not actually have site control. So it hadn't secured the rights to build on a particular parcel of land. The other project was shortlisted. I am not here today to talk about that project, however. Next slide, please. When the Power Resources team evaluated the projects, we used a rigorous approach that scored 3 areas and various sub-criteria within them. The 3 general areas were ability of the counterparty to execute a project, the economic competitiveness of the offer, and the development status of each project. Staff reviewed all elements of the projects and scored the qualitative criteria, but we used a quantitative methodology to evaluate the project's economic value. We actually used a model to calculate the net present value, or NPV, that we forecast for each project. To perform this NPV calculation, we used 3 different forward curves. When I think of a forward curve, I think of it as sort of a forecast of what energy market prices will be in the future. So we used 3 of these different estimations of what market prices will be in the future. Then we took a weighted average of the P5, P50, and P95 outcomes of those curves and normalized these calculations so that we were looking at the forecasted dollar value for each project on a megawatt for megawatt or more like for like basis. And this approach is very similar to the approach we used, or that EBCE used in its 2018 RFO. I will just note that in 2018, when EBCE went to market, EBCE worked with a consultant to perform a lot of the quantitative analysis. And this time around, because we have built out the power resources team and onboarded a variety of different quantitative tools, we were able to do this analysis in-house. Next slide, please. Tonight, I'm bringing 2 projects to the board for approval. And again, I am seeking the board's approval to finish negotiations and then execute the contracts. So what we have posted is what is called a pro forma, our standardized contract that goes along with these resolutions, or the resolutions for these 2 projects. The actual final contracts would include counterparty specific language and sort of minor differences from the standard document. And I will provide more information on the 2 projects in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So the first project is a 50 megawatt, 200 megawatt hour energy storage project. The developer of this project is LS Power. The contract will be 15 years long. It takes the form of a tolling contract structure. The project is expected to come online in November of 2024. As you'll see with the next project I'm about to talk about, that one will have a much sooner online date. We're bringing the LS Power project forward at this time because it is so close, the negotiations are so close to being finalized that we would like to use like probably the next week to wrap up negotiations and be able to execute the contract rather than waiting until the July board meeting. And although we would be in all likelihood totally done with the negotiations at that point, the longer you sit on a fully executed negotiation, new risk appears. And so we'd like, since we think we can wrap this one up very quickly, we'd like the board's permission to do so and then execute in a very timely manner. The project has an executed interconnection agreement. It has site control. Its discretionary permits are in late stages. LS Power will invest in EBCE's Community Investment Fund as part of this contract. They are committed to using union labor and prevailing wage standards. While our counterparty, we're referring, well, excuse me, I should say, the developer is LS Power. The name on the contract will be Tumbleweed Energy Storage, LLC. And then in terms of job creation, they are estimating that they will create 50 to 60 construction jobs, probably 5 to 6 operations and maintenance jobs. And there will be about 3 to 5 Alameda County local hires that will support this project. And as I said, some of the staffing will actually be located locally in Alameda County because LS Power has an office in Pleasanton. And I don't think I actually mentioned this a moment ago. The project itself is located in Kern County. Next slide, please. A little bit more about who LS Power is. They are a major US-based independent power producer. Their parent company is headquartered in New Jersey, or excuse me, they're headquartered in New York with offices in Pleasanton, New Jersey, and Missouri. They have a diverse portfolio of utility scale projects throughout North America. Their employee team are nearly 300 people. And since the company was incepted in 1990, they have developed, constructed, managed, and acquired over 45,000 megawatts of power generation, over 600 miles of transmission infrastructure, and they have developed over 11,000 megawatts of generation. They've raised over $47 billion in debt and equity financing to develop in North American infrastructure. And they currently have over $10 billion in equity capital invested. So this is a very experienced, financially backed, viable company. Next slide, please. The next counterparty and the next project is being developed by Convergent Energy and Power. This is a smaller project. It's a 10 megawatt, 40 megawatt hour battery. It will be based in Kings County. It will contribute to the greater Fresno area local RA requirements. This project will be able to come online this summer, so it can contribute to the state's summer reliability needs. And so with this project, while it's not, you know, a number of days away from ready to execute like LS Power is, the timeliness of the need for this project and the fact that we can get it online and have it contribute to summer 2021 reliability is the reason that we wanted to bring it forward at this time. Ultimately, we won't execute anything that we aren't comfortable with. But as I said, given the timing of our RA needs and the state's summer reliability needs, we wanted the authority to push this over the finish line and execute it as soon as it's ready. Because the project is already effectively fully constructed, it will come online and it will be our first battery, our first fully operating tolling contract. It has executed interconnection and site control, and the name of the contracting party for this one will be Henrietta, this is a typo, Henrietta D Energy Storage. Next slide, please. Convergent is another North American-based independent power producer. They focus on energy storage solutions. In 2019, a large investment company called Energy Capital Partners purchased Convergent, and it is providing the financial resources to allow Convergent to continue developing projects. It is currently the largest independent operator of energy storage solutions in North America, with over 120 megawatts and 240 megawatt hours of projects in operation. So Convergent was really very new, or excuse me, very early into the energy storage market. They are the first developer to build and operate energy storage as a non-wires alternative, a different way of looking at making utility infrastructure investments. And they have a 10 megawatt behind the meter energy storage system that is the largest behind the meter energy storage system in North America. We will be the first CCA that they are doing a deal with, but they have done deals with Southern California Edison. They've done projects in the New York Independent System Operator system, the New England system. They have other projects with Edison International, and they have a project in Maine. Next slide, please. This slide is an overview of the two batteries that we're talking about executing, and sort of gives a look at where they are located and as compared to our existing resources. The gray dots are EBCE's already contracted generating resources, and so the blue dots with lightning marks are these two batteries. As I said, well, I said for one of them, both projects are committed to using union labor. One of them will use union labor. The other already has used union labor because it is effectively built. Both projects are allocating funds toward our community investment fund. And I will just say, when I come back to you in July with additional projects, you will see that the final portfolio of resources that we're selecting does account for the potential for projects to fall out as a result of construction or permitting delays. Next slide, please. And here is an overview of the contracts that EBCE already has under, or the projects EBCE already has under contract. So as you see, we have 3 strictly generating resources, 2 resources that are solar paired with storage, and another project that is solar plus virtual storage. Basically, there's a financial structure behind that project that has it, well, providing what we think of as virtual storage. Next slide. The next steps in our RFO process, we will complete the negotiations of the 2 projects that we've brought you here. We will also complete negotiations of the other projects that are under shortlist, and we plan to come back to you in July with more projects. After we've executed all of these contracts, we will monitor them and assess the projects as they hit their key milestones and mature further. On August 2nd, we have to make an update filing to the Public Utilities Commission on our status towards meeting the IRP 2021 to 2023 electric reliability requirements. And then we will begin the next integrated resource plan cycle, and that will provide an opportunity for formal review of our portfolio to analyze our open position, our costs and risks, and we will have extensive further engagement with the board and the community when that begins in the spring, summer of 2022 timeframe. I think that's it, but next steps. Or excuse me, next slide. Yeah, I believe that's the end.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Colleagues, this is an opportunity to ask some questions. And while you're thinking of questions, I'm going to invite the public to give their public comment on this item, which is item 9, this contract proposal. So, Mr. Clerk, we can invite the public to raise their hand if they haven't already done so.
There is no one signed up for public comment for this item so far.
Okay. Okay. If someone does sign up, we still have time to get them in, so they still have a little bit of opportunity. Right now, I'm going to call on board members in this order: Councilmember Hannan, Councilmember Harrison, and Councilmember Naram.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Marie, thank you for the excellent report. My only question on Convergent, I noticed that it was a 10-year contract. As you finalize negotiations, assuming that's what the board authorizes, is there any hope that that contract can be extended beyond that 10-year period? And my second question would be, do these contracts come with options either on EBCE's part or the provider to extend the contract if it's mutually agreed upon? Thank you.
Thank you for that question and for drawing attention to something that is a typo in the slide, but is correct in the memo and the resolution. The Convergent contract is actually a 15-year contract. Now, as for the ability to extend contracts, we always have the ability to negotiate an extension that would be in addition to what is contemplated under the original agreement, but it is not explicitly laid out within the contracts.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? Did I hear you say, Marie, early in the presentation that there was some contract could be 5 to 20 years, 5 to 15 years?
What we went to market for, we told the market that we would consider projects, or we would consider contracts that were between 5 and 20 years long. In this RFO, we went to market looking for really a wide variety of different types of projects and contracts. So some of them would be new build storage or new build generating resources. Others would be more of like a shaped energy product where we might be getting energy from one or multiple projects. And so with those, we would be more likely to do a shorter term, like a 5-year deal. We are not bringing any of those particular deals to the board at this time. The 2 projects are standalone energy storage projects with 15-year contracts.
Okay, thank you. 15 years, I think, is a good amount of time. 5 years, I think as you're suggesting, a new project, 5-year contract doesn't help them. They're not going to want us to do that. But if a project already exists and there's a little extra energy around, we might as well grab some of it for a few years. Okay, who's next? Councilmember Harrison.
Yeah, hello, Marie. Thank you for this. I had 2 questions. I just, as somebody who looks really carefully at language, I saw that you said that LS Power was committed toward utilizing union labor and prevailing wages. does that mean they are committed to using both of those definitively?
Yes, they are
Okay.
definitively committed to using both.
Okay, great. And then I had this question last year. I'm still not clear on how this works. What kind of evaluative points do we give to local? You said there was one firm that was locally based in Alameda County. How much of a weight does that play in our decision making or your decision making?
Just to clarify, so LS Power has an office in Alameda County, but then I mentioned that we received an offer for a project that would be built in Alameda County.
Right.
And that project is shortlisted.
Great.
It's not part of it's not one of the two projects that I'm bringing forward at this time.
And yeah, that was my next question. So it is one of the shortlisted projects we might see in July, but what weight does it play about their local presence? Is there a weighting system that gives points for that, or how is that evaluated versus cost, capacity, et cetera?
Yes, we do have a number of points that we allocate for projects that are in California and extra points for projects that are in our service territory. I'm afraid I don't have the point scale pulled up in front of me.
Yeah, I can help speak to that as well. I mean, there's a few different factors that speak to location. So there is developer location. So whether the developer is actually based in territory or outside territory, there's a weighting applied to that, points apply to that. And then there's project specific that is, in territory or out of territory, as well as further to say if it's in California or outside of California, there's different weighting. There's different points applied to that. And then there's a third category that is sort of indirectly applied there, which is whether it utilizes Alameda County labor, because we did want to count projects that may not technically be in our service territory, but just over the border that may still tap into labor. And so we would still apply some points that would sort of favor that project as well, despite the project not being based in Alameda County or Safe Tracy for that matter, of course. Obviously, that not a lot of projects really fit into that, just to be clear, but we did want to at least account for it. That's under more of a labor section. So there's 3 different areas that account for that. I believe the total is 11% of the overall point weighting can be applied towards those various areas. So it is pretty significant.
Thanks, Howard.
Thank you, Howard. That's very helpful. And I think last year we also had this question about, we do some contracts up front and then we shortlist others. And I'm still unclear why we don't bring all of this at one time. Is it just a matter of when people are available, we don't want to lose them as potential business partners, or why are we not looking at the whole thing at once?
So let me speak to that. I think we actually had some very explicit feedback from some members of our board that that they would prefer to take a first round of contracts instead of waiting to do them all at once. And the rationale is, one, it's a lot of contracts, so there's a volume question, and but I think probably most significantly is, for many board members, this is the first round of power purchase contracts that will have been considered. So doing a couple projects to start was sort of recommended as kind of a good way to provide an introduction to the contract terms and the topic. And then next month, we're going to bring a much larger volume of projects.
Okay, great. And what percentage of the total capacity we're looking for do these 2 projects represent? So we're looking at like 40% now and 60% in July, or
probably like 15%, right? 20%
right now? Oh, okay. Okay.
I think that's a reasonable approximation, but because there is more uncertainty about the projects that we will be bringing, if some of them drop out, that percentage could increase or decrease.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, and Councilmember Narum. You're muted.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for pulling this off the consent and having the presentation, because it's helpful for us that are newer. And I'm happy to learn about LS Power in Pleasanton. I didn't know about that, so good to support one of our companies. 2 questions. On the Convergent contract, did I understand correctly that you're going to require an investment, or that they participate in our community investment fund? One question. And my second question is, as you evaluate these Have you considered, or do you talk to any agencies that they may already be doing business with, just to check and see, how they are to work with? Thank you.
I can confirm that both Convergent and LS Power have committed to making an investment in the Community Investment Fund. And we have not spoken to other agencies about their experience working with these two counterparties. These two counterparties have not actually done contracts with other CCAs before. Convergent is a smaller developer, and so this is the only project that they are negotiating in California right now. LS Power is a very large entity and has contracts throughout the country, including in California. I can report that in my professional experience prior to working at EBCE, I had experience working with both of these organizations.
Also, just add on, in the evaluation process, we do aggregate and seek a lot of background information on the organizations themselves, their experience. And so we get fairly detailed information about what their portfolio is and what their experience is in operating those types of those units.
Okay, so in other words, you have a fairly high level of comfort with both of these entities, that they can do what they say they will do, and will be good to work with.
Absolutely. That is very much, those qualifications are very much part of our evaluation criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair, this is Teresa Cox.
Yes.
I had a couple of questions. This is Teresa Cox, Fremont City Council.
Yes, please, you're up.
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if I was being heard. I really appreciate the presentation and the in-depth of what we're approaching on these projects. I wanted to find out, especially with one that is about 15 years long, and some of the other ones, were there any opportunities to be able to address cost savings and working with these companies? Was there any plan for that, or action or strategy, so we can over time reduce the cost if there's some opportunities like that?
Yeah, I'm going to try to answer your question, and please let me know if I haven't exactly gotten to what you mean. In order for developers to secure project financing, and then construct projects, they typically need to demonstrate a guaranteed revenue stream from the off-taker of a project, in this case, EBCE, so that they can prove to their lenders that the developers will be able to pay back the loans that they've received to build these projects. So there are not frequently opportunities to change the contract price during the life of the project, but there is a clause in the contract that we have pushed for that is very unique, and that is because these are both energy storage projects, and while there is no current federal tax subsidy for energy storage projects, we have language that states that if there becomes a federal tax subsidy for energy storage, and if that subsidy is able to be realized by each developer, that EBCE would be able to get a small savings if the developer realizes this gain.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. Okay, that's contingent. Let me ask you on another note then, another question. In the event if the prices start to, if they have the storage and the type of energy that's being generated, is there any price protection that we're locked in at a certain amount of usage or units of the megawatt?
Yes.
That we can protect ourselves?
Yes, very much so. So in the same way that if the developer's costs are less than they anticipated, we don't get any benefit. if the developer's costs are more than anticipated, we are not on the hook for that in any way. So we are agreeing to buy energy storage services, the ability to charge and discharge. So what the storage device does, we are paying for that for the life of the contract. And it is at a locked in price. If the project is not as available or not as reliable, there are damage payments that are built into the contract. So we would end up paying less if the batteries do not work as well as they're supposed to.
If I could just add in one other point on this is, I just want to make it really clear. I know oftentimes we bring forward generation projects, and those are sort of at $1 per megawatt hour typically. And just to clarify, because we didn't speak specifically about the price here because price under these PPAs are all generally confidential. So we're doing that evaluation based off of sort of an internal modeling perspective, and what we present to the board really doesn't speak specifically to the price. But for storage projects, it is generally priced on a kilowatt month basis. And so for each month, you pay a certain price regardless of whether you use that battery or you don't use that battery. And the value that we get from that battery, of course, is in part due to the resource adequacy that project provides, the ability to charge and discharge at critical times. And then the other part of the value, of course, is through other things like ancillary services and energy arbitrage. So charging the battery at times when prices are low, potentially even negative, and discharging the battery when prices are particularly high, generally in the evening ramp hours. And so that's really the sort of the value that we sort of seek and we model in these projects and some of the complexity there. The kilowatt month price, as Marie noted, that is a fixed price over the life of the contract. That's really the intent of why we sign these long-term agreements, whether it's a generation project or a storage capacity project. We want to lock in those prices. And the intent of the solicitation, of course, it's a competitive solicitation, and we negotiate pretty hard to continue to try to bring those prices down. And we will put on contracts over different periods of time over the life of this agency. And, sometimes prices will rise, sometimes prices will fall based off of technology installation costs. And right now, that tends to be a fairly favorable time for, say, solar installation, and it's starting to get more and more competitive for storage. But technology develops, and there are innovations in other ways, and so over time, obviously, those costs can change. But the intent of this, of course, is to lock in a technology for us and a hedge for us, so that we have more price certainty.
Excellent. Thank you very much. You explained it very well. Appreciate it.
Thank you for those excellent questions. Let's see, I'm going back to the attendee queue, and I don't see any hands raised there. Councilmember Narum, is your hand still up, or is that from before? You're good. Okay. So unless there's anything else from staff, I'm happy to entertain a motion. This is an action item. Councilmember Hannan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Hanna from Newark, moving staff's recommendation.
Okay.
Second.
And that's who seconded?
Second, Teresa Cox, Fremont City Council.
Oh, thank you, Councilmember Cox. Okay, that's a motion and a second. I'm seeing no additional hands raised. And so I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Yes, thank you. Alameda County. Alameda County.
Richard had to leave.
Okay, great. Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley.
Yes.
Dublin.
Yes.
Fremont.
Yes.
Hayward.
Yes.
Hayward.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Yes.
Piedmont. Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro.
Yes.
Tracy. Union City.
Yes.
Emeryville.
Aye.
And Oakland.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And yes, you got the Hayward vote, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. I just want to double check. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that, everybody, for those great questions, and thank you to staff for the great work you've been doing and have continued to be doing on gathering the contracts for our clean energy for our customers. And now we're going to move on to that very little insignificant item called our annual budget. Nick, I'm going to ask you to start the ball rolling.
Great, thank you. So I'm going, because this is a topic that has been discussed quite extensively over the last number of committee meetings, executive committee meetings, and board meetings. I am going to move fairly quickly through the budget itself and really focus on a kind of a more in-depth discussion of local development, and then really leave most of the time for questions from the board and from the community. So Adrian, can you go to slide? Can you go to slide 5 to start? Great. So as has been, as we have staff have mentioned, we are proposing no change to our value proposition, which means we are proposing to continue to offer a 1% discount for our base product relative to PG&E. And we are continuing to propose a 5% higher level of renewable energy relative to PG&E. These are both for our Bright Choice product. We are, proposing, or not proposing, we are going to be closing our Brilliant 100 product for previous board action. And so at the beginning of next year, we will have 2 products, Bright Choice and Renewable 100. Renewable 100 is priced at 1 penny a kilowatt hour more than the PG&E rate. In this fiscal year, we are forecasting a step down reduction in our uncollectibles from the current fiscal year, where we've observed roughly 2.5% revenue uncollectibles. We're projecting a step down to 2% in the first 6 months of the fiscal year and 1.5% in the second half of the year. We are seeing continued rising energy prices. That is somewhat offset by higher revenues as well. When we sort of move beyond sort of energy revenues and energy costs, which from a budget perspective are relatively more out of our control than overhead, because energy prices can fluctuate in ways that we can't control, and consumption and revenues can fluctuate in ways out of our control. We are projecting to add headcount this year. We are projecting a more or less flat overhead budget apart from the increase in personnel, with fairly significant reductions in some of our consulting service agreements, and but some fairly significant increases in software licensing for our increased staff levels to use for things like Marie highlighted, where we are now doing our own analysis of our energy procurement contracts as opposed to outsourcing that. One of the major changes in this iteration of the budget relative to what we have shown previously is we have increased our capital expenditure projection. In a previous iteration, we had, I believe, included $3.5 million, and that we've increased that to 5.5. That's not because we expect to pay more for a prospective building, but it's that we want to make sure that we have more than adequate buffer, depending on where we are able to land from a loan standpoint. We may find it advantageous to put a little bit more money down as we evaluate buying a building relative to taking a bigger loan. We also want to make sure we have more than adequate funds set aside for improvements to any building that we may want to buy. And then on the local development budget, we are proposing a roughly $2 million increase in local development relative to the current fiscal year. So I am going to, again, why don't I jump very quickly to personnel, just because I think that's always useful. So why don't we go to...
Well, Nick, hold on, hold on just a second. So instead of jumping, maybe we could just talk a little bit more about if there are questions about local development. And maybe, I think you said, if I could start, I'm the chair, so I can start. If you said that you're bumping up the local development budget by a couple million, is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, so why don't I jump to the local development slides and let's go right to
Yeah, let's get into that, then we can go to the personnel and other sections. How about that?
Great. Great, so slide 18. So our local development budget proposal for this fiscal year is $8.475 million, compared to $6.3 million from the last fiscal year. When we think about where those dollars are going, they're really going into four primary categories. And there are two areas that we're not funding this year, and I'll speak to why that is. So why don't we go to the first of the categories that we're and sort of the primary the primary area of investment in local development, which is transportation electrification. Slide 19, please. So we are proposing $5.45 million, $5.54 million in transportation electrification investment this year. I think as we think about why this is such an area of heavy emphasis, I think there are sort of three major drivers. First and foremost, as we think about local development and the goals of local development, what we want to try to achieve in our local development investments are transforming those sectors of our local economy that are most polluting and most environmentally harmful, and particularly most environmentally harmful to frontline communities and disadvantaged communities, those communities that have been historically most impacted by pollution. And in the East Bay, we are, I guess, lucky enough that we do not have significant numbers of power plants. We have two power plants, one relatively small one that we're working on strategies to shut down in Oakland, and then there is a power plant in Hayward. Not to minimize those impacts, but relatively speaking, the GHG emissions and point source particulate emissions from those plants really pale in comparison to the pollution that we see, both GHGs and air pollution from the transportation sector. And so in transportation, we really think of both light duty, so cars driving up and down the 80 corridor in particular, but also trucks and goods movement. Much of that goods movement originating at the Port of Oakland, and then dispersing throughout our community, going to logistics centers, in Hayward, San Leandro, Oakland, driving out, on 580, up and down 680, out to the city of Tracy. So, we really think about, the most significant source of environmental impact is really kind of derived from the transportation space. So that certainly is, I think, probably a North Star for why it's such an area of emphasis and focus. Two, it's an area where there's still significant underinvestment. So, the dollars that we allocate in transportation electrification are very needed dollars. And so when we think about charging infrastructure, and we think about supporting the adoption of vehicles, we see, not enough investment happening. And we believe that, every incremental dollar that we bring to the table in Alameda County is a needed dollar of investment. We're not somehow displacing money that would have come from the Air District or MTC. These are really necessary dollars that are needed to invest, because we're really behind when it comes to things like available charging infrastructure. We just don't have enough charging infrastructure for the vehicles that we have, and certainly not for the vehicles that we need to achieve our environmental goals. And then, I think we also think about, and it's not spoken to in these slides, but I think it's important just to note is that, building out transportation electrification is also a potentially very significant source of economic activity. Tens of thousands of people live in the East Bay in Alameda County and work in the goods movement business, whether it's at the port or for many, one of the many companies that moves goods from the port around Northern California. And so the electrification of transportation can create both good jobs as we think about constructing things like EV charging stations, but the transition from dirty diesel trucks to electric trucks is also going to create economic opportunity for drivers. It's going to help save them money and lower their operating costs, and also provide environmental benefits to them and to the community. So we see it sort of as a win-win-win: environmental, economic, and also presenting East Bay with an opportunity for return on investment as well. So we also think about transportation electrification as a way to leverage the dollars we invest and earn a return on those dollars that over time is going to allow us to continue to invest more and more and more. So it creates a virtuous cycle of ever more investment in local development over time. So that's sort of I think the high level kind of rationale for the emphasis and focus on transportation electrification. Next slide, please. So within transportation electrification, $4 million is being set aside to support investment in publicly available charging infrastructure. And this is charging infrastructure that is going to be built to support vehicle adoption, predominantly vehicle adoption and usage for renters. One of the major challenges we have really everywhere, but it's acute here in Alameda County, is the fact that if you don't have a garage where you can park your car and home charge, you really don't have much ability to charge your vehicle. So our goal is to remedy that deficiency through investing in charging stations up and down the service territory. And this $4 million is sort of part of that effort. We had allocated $4 million from our previous fiscal year. We're going to be bringing in around $12 or $13 million of California Energy Commission electric vehicle incentive program incentives as well. So we're talking about pretty significant dollars that we're going to be leveraging to invest in this infrastructure. We also have a relatively small for now, but we hope to scale up a program to provide fueling cards to our low-income customers to help make EV vehicle adoption even more attractive. One of the other things I think just worth noting here, and it's something that I think we're continuing to work on, is as we build charging stations, we also are going to be working with programs like the Clean Cars for All, which is managed by the Air District, and provides significant incentives to low-income residents to actually buy vehicles. And so, we want to create a sort of a push and a pull. We want to create the pull with our charging stations, and we want to create a push mechanism where we really engage customers and identify ways for them to get in these vehicles that are, especially when you think about the incentives provided by the Air District, very cost effective. We do have some rollover from last year's local development plan that is largely related to just dollars that haven't gotten out the door yet. Next slide. One of our other sort of really significant efforts that we're undertaking is a municipal vehicle electrification program. Right now, this program is predominantly focused on technical assistance to our cities. We're working with a number of our cities to support them in their efforts to transition their internal combustion vehicle fleets to all electric fleets. And this is something that we believe has the opportunity to move hundreds, potentially over 1,000 internal combustion vehicles off the roads of the East Bay in the very near term. And so this year's fiscal year, though, is really focused on the continued technical assistance. And I think in future years, we intend to potentially ask for more capital to support that program. Next slide, please. Now, I think when we think about the really kind of, in a lot of ways, at least from an environmental perspective, the real sort of most important work we can do to sort of change the air quality dynamic, particularly adjacent to the port, it's really the electrification of our medium and heavy duty goods movement. In this budget, we are still sort of working, I would say, predominantly in the technical assistance arena. I think there's still some work to be done to develop the right business models and bring the right customers together to be able to transition drayage truck operators in particular from diesel to electric. And so this fiscal year, we're looking at north of $750,000 for that continued sort of technical assistance, site assessment, technical analysis. Our intention is, and indeed, if we have the opportunity to do it faster, we will come back to the board to evaluate that. But our intention is to bring a host of partners together to build a series of large charging lots, in sort of strategic places that will facilitate truck operators' ability to transition from diesel to electric. We also are looking at bringing third-party partners in who can provide vehicle finance solutions to these truck operators. That's often one of the challenges that we observe. Many drayage trucks are independently owned. So, one person who owns a single truck or two trucks, they work through a logistics company. And so the challenge is you can't just go to, in the drayage space, which is much of the goods movement, you can't just go to an Amazon and have them replace 100,000 trucks at a time. You really have to go person by person. And so creative solutions with vehicle leasing at their center, we think are good options. And so we're very actively looking at developing a leasing model that we can bring forward to some of our to some of these logistics companies and many of these independent operators. I think one thing to highlight here and that we're very excited about is we've secured $500,000 in grants to do this, to support this work additionally. One is a grant from the California Energy Commission and another is from the US EPA. The next category is our community resilience program. And this is our, next slide, please, Adrian. So our community resilience program, you'll note there's not a lot of budget in this, but that doesn't actually reflect the fact that we're not going to be investing significantly in this program. What we're seeing here is we have sort of a critical facility program that we've been running, and we have our first 40 or so sites that we're going to hopefully be breaking ground on this fiscal year. But because the structure of these projects is going to be one where we are very likely raising third-party capital to pay for the capital costs of construction and equipment, and then partnering with our cities to sell them that rooftop solar. There's a very limited fiscal impact for UBC. So from a budget perspective, we actually don't have to bring millions of dollars forward to support tens of millions of dollars of investment in our energy resilient public facilities program. Our goal here is to deploy solar and storage across north of 100 facilities across the East Bay. And those projects, in total, should exceed $30–40 million of total capital investment. Almost all, and perhaps all of that will be third-party capital. So we will have a limited need to draw from our budget to support that program. What we're doing this year, though, is we're doing some engineering work to support that, and we're doing some additional analysis for our new communities. We are going to be, running our medical baseline battery offering. So a few months ago, you did approve a contract to buy $150,000 of batteries, home batteries that we're going to be able to deliver to customers with durable medical goods that they'll be able to plug in their ventilators, their dialysis machines during a public safety power shutoff. And so I think we're going to be implementing that program this summer and evaluating how that goes. And I think if it goes well, we may indeed try to find some funds to expand it in the future. So, one thing you'll note in our budget, next slide, please, is an energy efficiency. We did not actually ask for any money. That doesn't mean that we're not pursuing energy efficiency. What we're doing is we are pursuing a pathway with the California Public Utilities Commission to administer what we hope to be around $3 million a year in state energy efficiency dollars. So we're preparing that filing right now. We'll be filing at some point this summer. And our hope is that by around the end of this fiscal year, beginning of next fiscal year, we'll start to implement that program. So you'll see in our next budget, $3 million, hopefully, of investment in energy efficiency that we're making, but that does not have actually a direct fiscal impact on our bottom line. In building electrification, next slide, please. So building electrification, I would say are focusing on really two core initiatives. One is our low and moderate income electrification incentive program. So that's an incentive program that we're going to be focusing on targeting electrification measures in low income housing. And then our other initiative is focused on cooking, both induction cooking for commercial restaurants and also an induction lending program for residents. The reason we're really focusing on cooking is one of the things that we consistently hear from both individuals but also from commercial real estate developers who are going and building new buildings. And these are the buildings that are subject to many of your city's natural gas bans, is a concern about shifting from cooking with natural gas to cooking with induction. People I think think that cooking with natural gas is better. It's a better cooking quality. And so and that's both restaurants and home cooks. And so we're really sort of leaning into this idea that there's a lot of education that we can do. And in educating people about the benefits of induction, that's actually going to facilitate electrification more broadly, particularly in new construction. So more restaurants are going to be comfortable leasing space in buildings that are being built with no gas hookups, and more residents are going to be comfortable buying or renting an apartment in a building that doesn't have a gas hookup. We also do have a electrification workforce development grant. It is $50,000, which I do recognize is a somewhat limited amount. I think one of the things we have found in electrification is, again, we're in a very early stage of the building electrification space. And so on the one hand, on the other hand, there's a lot of different state and regional efforts around electrification workforce development. And so we found that $50,000 was really sort of the sweet spot for us to make one or two very tactical workforce development grants, while continuing to sort of do what we can to support broader efforts that are bringing much larger dollar amounts, but also that may not really be ready to go because there just aren't that many building electrification jobs, because there just isn't that much building electrification happening yet. And then finally, and I would say probably most importantly of all of our local development, next slide, please, Adrian, is our Connected Communities program. And this is our comprehensive effort to support customer debt management. So, as we've discussed in a number of our previous meetings, we have north of $10 million of outstanding customer debt. Most of that is directly associated with most of that has been accrued over the last year and a half. And so that's the challenge. The opportunity is there is very significant money that is flowing from the state and federal government to support customer debt relief. And so, our sort of first focus is to engage customers and to engage with community-based organizations to help our customers find their way onto the various programs that are providing direct utility debt relief. The primary one that we're really focused on and working with is the arrearage management program, which is offered through the California Public Utilities Commission. And I won't go into great depth. There's another slide here. We can talk a little bit more about it. But that's really our sort of first step, first focus is engaging with customers and trying to direct them into the various debt relief programs that are out there. The next step, and you know, I think once we have sort of felt like we've done as much as we can on the engagement side, we do have significant uncollectibles, which at some point in time we will write off. And when we write those uncollectibles off, that erases the customer debt. So we're forecasting that, you know, we may end up erasing up to $10 million of customer debt. We may erase up to $10 million of customer debt by the end of this fiscal year. And I think the only other point is we are going to be launching our disadvantaged community green tariff, which is our disadvantaged community solar program, which is going to provide around 2,000 low-income customers an additional 20% reduction on their utility bill. And so we're using that also as a tool, targeting customers with large arrearages to help reduce their current costs, to help them then catch up on their arrearages. And that's actually something that you know, we kind of innovated as an approach that other CCAs haven't been doing, and we're hoping other CCAs may follow in our footsteps because, you know, this is a tool. Let's try to use that tool to manage customer utility debt. Next slide, please. So this is our kind of what we sort of our end-to-end arrearage management plan. You know, we first want to focus on maximizing enrollments, and as we enroll customers, we want to retain them. So targeted outreach, CBO partnerships, working on fixing some of the processes that PG&E has put in place that make it actually hard to enroll in the program, and trying to develop more online, more text-based, more multi-language-based ways to enroll. So just making it easier to enroll. So and then once we enroll our customers, we are going to proactively we're going to watch those customers very closely. And we are going to, through our call center, provide a case management system. So as customers may start experiencing challenges keeping up with paying their current bills, and when you miss 2 current payments, you lose your spot in the arrearage management program. We are going to be doing proactive outreach to those customers when we see sort of any sort of a sign that they may fall out of the AMP program. And then those CSRs, those case managers will be provided the ability to provide bill credits to those customers on their current bills to help keep those customers current. And one of the reasons why we're taking this approach, as opposed to just giving, say, blanket bill credits to all of our care customers or all of our AMP customers, is we really want to make sure we're targeting our funds towards those customers who need it, so that we can maximize our impact. Instead of saying we're going to give, you know, 10 or 15 or, you know, $50 to every customer, we want the ability to be able to say, hey, can we intervene with a $200 or $300 bill credit? And that $300 bill credit will mean the difference between that customer being able to stay current on a bill and not being disconnected. That's very much the approach we want to take. And so that's how we're designing our bill credit and retention program. So that is the local development presentation. About as fast as I could have gone through it.
No, I appreciate that.
I think that's probably about it. I don't know if I need to speak to personnel. You know, I think, you know, we're planning to add 6 personnel, 6 FTEs, which would take us to 43 total FTEs. So that's my main comment there. And we've presented this on a handful of occasions, so I think might be best to just go to Q&A.
Okay, appreciate that. I know there's also money, you know, about marketing and outreach, and revenue questions, obviously, but let's take questions from board members first on any aspect of the budget, although the presentation, I think, rightfully focused on local development elements. It's obviously a very large budget overall. And so I'm seeking anybody want to raise their hand here among board members? Oh, here we go. Okay. And after that, we'll take some comments from our advocates among the public, and then we'll come back to board members again. Okay, in this order, Mayor Hernandez, Councilmember Harrison, and Mary Sutter from our Community Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Chair Calb. I just wanted to add that I think Nick's done a really good job in this. I know that he has dealt with my various phone calls to him a handful of times, but I just wanted to, it's more of a comment. It's really important, I think, for the cities at this time. I know that there was a little article written on Dublin with regards to how many residents were, were delinquent in their PG&E bill / East Bay Community Energy bill. So that's when I really started getting a little concerned because, obviously as the mayor of Dublin, my residents are my priority. So we kind of toss back and forth of ideas that we can come forward. But I know that I've been speaking to my city manager also at length in this conversation. But I think it's really important for us to also be able to, all the cities, to be able to assist Nick with making sure that we're also reaching out to the CBOs, and we're also making sure that we're doing our part as board of trustees on this committee to make sure that we are getting the customers the help that they need. So that was just a comment because I think that we can all play a big role in this part.
Thank you. Thank you for those excellent words. Next, we have Councilmember Harrison.
I wanted to thank Nick also on the emphasis on electrification of transportation, which is clearly our area where we're falling furthest behind. And I do appreciate the emphasis on tenants. I think that's really critical and is a core equity piece and something we need to focus on. And also I appreciate the idea that we're going to be looking at trying to help people that are involved in the purchases back of their old cars to buy more efficient cars. So I think that both of those are excellent equity ideas. I would say that I still feel that the emphasis on owned vehicles, and this is just, me as a Berkeleyite, does have inherently in it an inequitable piece. And Nick and I have spoken about this before, trying to look at electrification of shared vehicles and micro-mobility vehicles. Not everyone owns a car, and not everyone needs to drive a car every day, but we'd like the cars they do drive them when they're driving less to be as efficient as possible. So I'm hoping that there's some room in here as we go through this next year to look at the idea of shared vehicles, gig vehicles, et cetera, and also micromobility scooters, excuse me, and bicycles for that last mile. Also, just generally speaking, although I know some people are feeling that there's not enough emphasis on equity in this budget, that I do think equity in a cleaner environment in general is an equity issue, because who is really harmed by climate change? It's poorer people. So even though we don't see a one-by-one correspondence sometimes, and it feels like people that own things are getting more things, them having that is going to be better for everyone, including lower income people. But again, I'm really hoping we can think about the small last mile type solutions and not just focus on ownership of a car, because we need to get rid of the cement we have in all of our cities. Also, I wanted to ask a question about who the workforce grants are going to. Do you have people, organizations identified for that yet? Or is that something you'll be working on?
We have to date worked with a number of organizations on workforce. So, I would certainly think we would look to partner with them, but they are not going to be our exclusive partners. I think we will assess if there are others. So we have worked and provided workforce grants to Rising Sun Energy Center, the Cypress Mandela Center, and to Las Positas College.
Thought of other community colleges as well?
Those were the three. Certainly, I think, as we are often, as we often try to do, we try to sort of ensure there's geographic diversity in our grant making. And so, Rising Sun is based in Oakland. Cypress Mandela has one of their two facilities. I believe it's in Union City. And then Las Positas is in Livermore. So in that way, we were sort of able to support workforce development kind of in a geographically diverse way. But certainly, again, we are open to working with other community colleges, other entities that do this kind of workforce development.
Do you do any work with unions, for example, the Carpenters Union or any of the other trades in terms of workforce development?
We have not made specific grants to unions. We also do work with trades around our projects. So I'd say like most of the work we've done around trades have been more embedded in the power purchase agreements and the project labor agreements that have apprentice requirements.
Okay, thank you. When you're talking about enrollment in AMP, the Asset Arrearage Management Program, are you also at the same time enrolling people in CARE and FARA? Is that part of the effort?
That is part of our connected communities is, with those CBOs, we will also be doing work related to CARE and FARA enrollment and CARE and FARA outreach. It was not specifically called out because that has been some ongoing work that we've been doing, whereas, AMP is a really targeted program for customers who are most at risk of disconnection. Now, CARE and FARA is a tool, and so as I think about our engagement with CBOs, to the degree that they're not familiar with that program, that's definitely going to be a part of the conversation and the training that we're going to be giving them is that, hey, there's this tool. Let's encourage folks that you engage with to assess whether or not they're eligible for that program.
Okay,
and then Nick,
if
I can add. So in order to be eligible for CARE or for AMP, one has to be a CARE customer. So part of our CARE enrollment in the past has been, trying to reach customers who we think might be eligible for CARE. Now that we have the AMP eligible customers, we also can see who has high arrearage, who is not CARE. So as we start to think about how we reach people who could be eligible for CARE, those are parts of the data that we might look at and say, oh, these people have very high arrearage, but they're not already CARE. Let's talk to them first to see if they can get into CARE. And if they can, then they can enroll in AMP.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Does this help us at all with the question we had from Ms. Tovar about the utility debt program at CPUC? I think you indicated that you are actively pursuing work with them. I wasn't sure if we had a chance to follow up on her comment on what work EBC is doing to promote this work through the CPUC.
Yeah, I mean, so that's very much the arrearage management program is a PUC kind of enabled program. And so we're working very closely with the PUC to try to enhance that program. So, as I had mentioned, there's some of the challenges that we've seen around customer sign up have been long wait times and, having to call sort of a specialty call center. So, can we move from having to call a call center to being able to sign up online? Can we move from signing up online to being able to text their sign up? Or can you allow a third party like EBC to sign customers up on their behalf? So those are the kinds of things we've been doing to enhance the program.
And Chair Calb, is it appropriate for me to ask at this point, are we looking at sending a letter to the CPUC requesting an extension of their program? This may not be on topic right now, but I think it fits with what we're trying to do with the arrearage management.
Yeah, you could ask it, sure.
So, Mr. Chass, the letter that was referenced, is that something we're pursuing, the extension of their program?
We have not, I'm not aware of us explicitly seeking to extend the disconnections moratorium. That is not a piece of policy that we've been focused on.
I'm hoping the executive committee will consider that maybe at its June meeting, as if there's limited time to do that. I wanted to ask about the sale of the nuclear attributes. As I understood it last December, when this was agreed on, of accepting and selling nuclear attributes, that money was going to go into local development. Is that reflected here in the budget?
It's not explicitly reflected in the budget. and Howard, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I can comment. There are no funds relating to the sale of nuclear included in this budget. I think it's, we're midway through the year. Under my understanding, there's been very limited sales, unfortunately, but there is still 6 months left in the year, and one could foresee that that would be the time frame where you'd probably see more activity as people sort of look to finalize their sort of portfolio positions and may have a need for some form of energy, and particularly in light of it being sort of a drought year with very limited large hydro. So the short answer is we're not assuming anything because we'd rather be conservative and not be counting on funds that may or may not actualize. And I would say at a high level directionally, I think it's probably going to be at the lower end of the range that we had anticipated, unfortunately, but obviously midway through the year, so time will tell still as they're still out there sort of marketing.
Procedurally, does that come back as a budget amendment to us, or would you wait till the next fiscal year?
It wouldn't come as a budget amendment because it's, it would be kind of a form of energy revenue. And,
okay,
when you approve the budget, you're not explicitly approving a specific energy procurement budget or a specific revenue because of the nature of our energy costs and our energy revenue are such that you can't actually a year ahead of time set this shall be the budget. Otherwise we'd be coming back every month. No, this is the budget. No, this is the budget.
Will you let us know if the attributes are sold?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that was explicitly discussed with the item when it was approved, that we would make sure to come back to the board and be transparent about what was sold, and what sort of value was gained from that.
Okay, it's sort of a newbie question. Sorry, just got here. And then I have one more comment, and that is that of course I would like to see even more money go into local development. We're looking at this $2 million increase, which is impressive, but we also see a much more significant increase in expenses of $96 million in the budget. And we also have an increase of $15 million in our ending year-end balance position. So, and also we are now taking out money that we spent on COVID, which was some significant share of that. I think it was like $700,000. So we had this emergency, we put this money in, now that money's out. So we're not really increasing this budget by as much as we would have we not had COVID and looked at the year before. So I just want to say, for me, I still think the local development budget is short and more revenue should be put there. I don't know what to do about that at this point. I'm sure the executive committee has discussed it. I really appreciate all the programs you developed and the thinking behind it. I just feel like the number is short from my point of view, and I would like to see more revenues go there.
Okay, thank you, Kate. And next was Mary Sutter.
So I had 2 points I wanted to make. The CAC also discussed this budget on Monday, and we had a lot of discussion, mainly focused on the LDBP projects, similar to what you just heard here. We had a lot of conversation around the vehicle electrification, the amounts, what's going to happen, things like that. Ultimately, we voted to support the budget as presented, without much more than just the fact that we support the budget. So that was one thing. And that was that's wearing my CAC chair hat. Now, I also wanted to remind folks that one of the initiatives that we're working on is metrics around equity, specifically for these LDBP projects. And that could eventually make it to how much to the budget. This is something that JP and myself and Jane Frank, who's the vice chair, have been discussing. JP's been working on trying to bring this to the public in a public meeting to try and decide how one should measure the equity components that are in these projects. LDBP originally in the plan had 7 different metrics. Equity wasn't one of them. But also in that plan, they really put forward that this year, this kind of year we're doing now, is to really consider different metrics, new metrics, and start putting them into place next year. So I think that there's things in the works that can really begin to make its way more directly to the CAC and also therefore to the board around metrics. And my assumption is you guys are going to be interested in some of that at the point that it's ready for primetime consumption. And JP, if you want to say anything more about that, feel free. But I just wanted to remind everybody that that was also going on.
Thank you. Nick or JP, anything else? Comments or reactions? Okay. Colleagues, any other questions? We're going to go to the public now, and then we can come back to the board members in case there are additional comments or questions. Mr. Clerk, why don't we call members of the public to give their comments, and then we'll move on.
Yes, we have 17 speakers and counting. I see more hands being raised right now. So I'm going to go ahead and call members to speak the public to speak 3 people at a time. So first up is, let me just get my cue here. Alan Marling, Andrew Clutie, and Zaria Temple. Andrew Marling, I am unmuting you now. One second. Actually, I'm going to go to Zaria Temple. Zaria Temple, I'm unmuting you now.
Good evening. My name is Zoria Temple. I live in Union City, California, and I'm a young Black college student at San Francisco State University. I'm with the local Clean Energy Alliance. I find it vital that I speak on behalf of the individuals and communities who are often silenced because they're excluded from environmental decisions. Low income and Black and Brown communities are most likely to receive the brunt of the effects of climate change. Yet they are the working class that powers the energy used in your home. They are the communities that sacrifice their health and well-being for your own. These underserved communities should not have to sacrifice reliable energy sources during power shutoffs, like my friend in Vallejo, who has a sickly grandmother who needs insulin refrigerated and eats from a tube implanted in her stomach. The Biden administration has allocated 40% towards clean energy equity in the Biden infrastructure plan. The Biden-Harris administration's Justice 40 initiative is an incredible opportunity to finally center communities that have suffered most from dirty energy and the effects of climate change. The same communities that can lead us through a just transition to a clean energy economy, said Gloria Walton, CEO of the Solutions Project. Let's not fail the local people and communities who have suffered the most from unclean and harmful energy, reproductive harm, asthma, destroyed homes, and death due to climate change. Let's provide support for funding equity investments like energy resilient hubs in these communities during uninformed power outages and emergencies. I support East Bay Clean Power Alliance's call for EBCE to provide 40% of the local development business plan toward equity investments. Thank you.
Margie Lewis. Margie Lewis, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. I am an Oakland resident and I work with CBE, Communities for a Better Environment. The Biden administration has allocated 40% of the budget in the Biden infrastructure plan for clean energy equity. They are prioritizing underserved communities. EBCE also has to allocate at least 40% of its LDBP budget to programs that benefit frontline low-income, disabled, and environmental justice communities, which have been hardest hit by pollution and kept out of the clean energy economy. EBCE needs to work with community organizations to seek out and use essential facilities which have the potential to be community energy resilience hubs during public safety power shutoffs or other unforeseen crises like wildfire, smoke pollution. EBCE could and should be leading in community climate disaster mitigation by funding and advancing East Bay grassroots energy resilience hubs and community microgrids. EBCE needs to reinstate the community innovation grants in the local development business plan. Seed money is needed to support new ideas. Money is needed for COVID-19 utility debt relief. We can't EBCE out for the organizations have been waiting for 2 years to apply for community innovation grants for resilience hub plans. Time is running out. We can't wait anymore when community health is on the line. We have ideas about how to accomplish this. Energy access locations with off-grid solar and battery storage. For East Bay locations to power up during a PG&E power shutoff. Subscribing to a solar access program for low-income care fair customers that would offer an additional 20% off your bill on top of your care fair discount. Becoming a low-income solar program sponsor can be a community group organization. Battery giveaway program or deep discounted battery for a medical need. COVID-19 utility debt program. Work with the community. Come to us. We have ideas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margie. Jada Dogan, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Adrian. Hi, Jada Durmaz-Dogan with the Local Clean Energy Alliance. First, I would like to thank the local development business plan staff for sharing the budget details about different programs. Also, thanks for introducing bill relief credit. However, we're still upset to see that most of the LDBP budget primarily benefits middle and upper income customers. Electric vehicles, heat pump water heaters, and induction cooktops are out of reach for people struggling to make ends meet. So we would like EBC to fund programs that would benefit frontline communities. One example that Zori already mentioned is community resilience hubs. Resilience hubs are trusted facilities that provide critical services to our communities and can function during emergencies and disasters. Some examples are community centers, senior and youth centers, childcare facilities, food banks, homeless shelters, places of worship, and community land trusts, and they're more listed. And developing community resilience hubs is an equity issue because frontline communities are hardest hit by power shutoffs and climate disasters. And there are a number of community organizations that have already been working on this issue, but unfortunately, the lack of technical knowledge and resources about how to develop microgrid technologies is a huge barrier for most community-based organizations. This is why, as a public agency, we think EBC should help communities overcome those barriers and help save lives by providing financial and technical support for community-driven microgrid resilience hubs. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Sarah Moore. Hold on 1 second. Sarah Moore, I'm on to speak for 2 minutes.
Apologies. Hi, my name is Sarah Moore. I'm the Sustainability Program Manager in the City of Berkeley's Office of Energy and Sustainable Development. And I'm calling to express appreciation from EBC's local development programs that are helping to support the City of Berkeley's work to become a fossil fuel-free city, and future budgeting and programs that will offer additional support. For example, EBCE completed a municipal fleet electrification assessment for the City of Berkeley last year that provides direction for electrifying our light-duty fleet vehicles by 2030. And our hope is that EBCE will also be able to help us with a service product to provide charging infrastructure for Berkeley's municipal fleet vehicles. We appreciate EBCE's resources and technical support towards transportation electrification in all sectors, particularly the areas that help address equity concerns, such as delivering publicly available charging to support renters, including residents of affordable multifamily developments, which was identified as a need in Berkeley's electric mobility roadmap, as well as shared electric vehicles and micromobility. So I'd also like to echo Berkeley Councilmember Harrison's request for support in that area. Medium and heavy duty goods movement electrification has been outside of Berkeley's scope to take on, but our residents and workforce, particularly those located along the I-80-580 corridor, can directly benefit from those due to the positive health impacts of replacing diesel with electrified transportation. Transportation emissions make up approximately 60% of Berkeley's entire greenhouse gas inventory. We appreciate EBCE's support and resources in this sector. And we've also been working with EBCE for the past year and a half on the energy resilient public facility program with hopes that it will help Berkeley install solar and storage systems on critical municipal facilities which serve the community during times of emergency. Having EBCE lead this process to develop these systems has been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shana Nanavati. You're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Shana Nanavati, and I'm with Reclaim Our Power, the utility justice campaign. So like everyone on this call, I'm sure, last year's fire season deeply affected me. Climate chaos is here, and it's now. But while wealthy folks are able to invest in electric vehicles, solar, and storage to keep their houses air conditioned and air filtered, the reality for thousands of East Bay residents is drastically different. I was out at multiple homeless encampments last August with churches and mutual aid groups where families and children who are already being devastated by the housing crisis and COVID were suffering through the record-breaking heat wave and breathing in lethal levels of particulate matter. What people need is access to safe spaces where they're able to go and breathe in clean air. Clean air and electricity are a human right. In the limited time that I spent outside that month, I developed asthma that still hasn't gone away. So please try to put yourself in the shoes of someone who has to live in these conditions. The Reclaim Our Power campaign is currently trying to build support and find funding to build community trusted resilience hubs where people can access clean air and electricity during these times of crisis. We stand with the East Bay Clean Power Alliance in asking EBCE to work with community organizations to identify and deploy community microgrids in locations that are actually serving those who are most desperately in need, not just municipal critical facilities. At minimum, 40% of the local development business plan funds need to be spent in frontline communities. We must be living in different realities. If you think that low-income renters have any room in their budgets to buy EVs, well, people aren't even able to pay their electricity bills. And we need funds now for both debt relief and resilience hubs. So reinstating community innovation grants should also be a priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jessica Tovar. Jessica Tovar, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, Jessica Tovar with the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. First, I do want to thank the local development business plan and the rest of the board and staff for creating this utility debt program and really investing in that, because moving forward, preventing power shutoffs is what we need to be doing. And you know, within the power that our community choice program has to support our local community, because electricity is a human right. I want to echo the calls for raising the budget when it comes to equity investments, for all the reasons that have already been shared. But I do also want to highlight another aspect of equity. Equity is also about hiring people from frontline communities, people of color, women, queer community, the disabled community, and really investing in them to be part of this clean energy future that we're trying to build. And we do want to see that happen within East Bay Community Energy. We would like for you to share any job postings moving forward with us so that we can share with our community organizations so that we can start putting members of our community to work. And, you know, again, I really want to echo the investment. I am not a clean energy expert, but I became one because somebody, you know, really wanted to see me move forward and understand this sector so that we can crack the egg and really see equity happen in the clean energy economy and really create that job force that we have been advocating for so long. Clean power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Eric Pearson. Eric Pearson, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the proposed budget. My name is Eric Pearson. I'm the Environmental Services Manager for the City of Hayward. I've been working very closely with many of the EBCE staff members, including members of the local development team. First, I just want to say it's really a pleasure to work with all the staff at EBCE. It's great to have EBCE as a partner, helping Hayward to meet our climate action goals. EBCE is an excellent resource that's offering innovative programs and that are aimed at benefiting all members of our community. Specifically, I want to speak in support of a few of the budget line items. Hayward's climate action plan identifies the transportation sector as the largest source of emissions, and as it's been an area that as a city has been very difficult for us to address. So we're very much in support of the plans to provide publicly available EV charging. Our renters and folks that are not able to install their own chargers will be very appreciative. We're also in support of the work on fleet electrification for medium and heavy duty trucks. And then municipal fleet electrification. We're looking forward to kicking off an assessment of Hayward's fleet in the next few weeks. And then finally, the energy resilient public facility program. Just last night, our city council approved Hayward's participation in the program. And so we're looking forward to implementing some solar and storage projects supported by this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Rachel DeFranco. DeFranco, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Yes, I'm Rachel DeFranco, the Sustainability Manager with the City of Fremont. I want to stress that implementation of programs and projects under the Local Development Fund really helps cities like Fremont meet and exceed our local climate action goals, providing resources and technical assistance that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. As my colleagues in Berkeley and Hayward have mentioned, transportation is the largest source of GHG emissions in our community. And while the city has a lot of ongoing efforts to focus on improving mobility, especially focusing on complete streets, protected bike lanes, vehicle electrification is not significantly addressed in these efforts, and it is going to be key to achieving deep GHG emission reductions in alignment with local and state goals to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045 or sooner. This budget supports EBCE local programs to accelerate transportation electrification across all vehicle duty classes. I just want to highlight, on the passenger vehicle sector, Fremont has some of the highest levels of EV ownership in the state, and I think most significant in the county of Alameda, but some of the lowest amount of publicly available charging infrastructure. And EV adoption is still heavily weighted toward homeowners in the higher income brackets. Public charging that focuses charging locations close to multifamily housing will ensure that EVs are accessible to all, not just wealthy homeowners. On the commercial side, what we've seen significant strides in passenger vehicle electrification. Medium and heavy duty vehicles are still significantly behind. Fremont in particular is a manufacturing hub with freight vehicles constantly moving goods into and out of Fremont regionally along the 880 and 680 corridors and beyond. We're excited to see EBCE allocating funding to both passenger and freight vehicle electrification, which is going to be critical for Fremont in achieving our GHG reduction goals and becoming a post-carbon community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Igor Trega. Igor Trega, be recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much to the board and staff for your thoughtful budget. I'm actually speaking today with my hat of being vice chair of the Alameda County Democratic Central Committee. And I would like to read the resolved clauses of a resolution urging 40% equity investments in EBCE's programs and policies. So the two clauses are, be it resolved that the Alameda County Democratic Party calls on the board of directors of EBCE to resolve that at least 40% of the LGBP budget should directly benefit environmental justice communities and disabled people, including programs such as on-bill repayment for energy efficiency programs, incentive tariffs to promote rooftop solar installations for low-income customers, solar plus battery installations on community resilience hubs to provide energy resilience during power shutoffs, community shared solar programs, solar installations for multi-unit affordable housing with mandated benefits for renters and displacement protection, clean energy job training programs with local hire provisions and prevailing wage guarantees. Be it further resolved that the Alameda County Democratic Party, or just the EBCE board, to ensure that the local development business plan budget includes financing for community focus groups to ensure that there's a robust community feedback and guidance in all environmental justice products. So we stand with our partners at the EBCPA and many others to urge you to move towards equity and vote your values through this very important vote on the budget. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Blair Beekman. Blair Beekman, you're recognized for 2 minutes. Blair Beekman, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, Blair Beekman. I made it here. Thank you. Thanks a lot for this item. Congratulations that we've survived AB 1139. And there's still the CPUC issues that we have to deal with, the future of solar and storage. And there's a bit of backwards thinking that I think we can work towards ways that can be like, the word is win-win for everyone, and open and forward thinking, and doesn't have to penalize the solar and storage for our future. EBCE has been working on really interesting ideas towards that end. Your IPR reports of December and October of last year were difficult to help the they're difficult to help the EBC programs were difficult to help the solar and storage in the years of 2023, but you learn to change that and work towards to even that out. I think it's those practices that you bring to the state level and show we don't have to work backwards in our future towards a solar and storage future. With that said, I wanted to quickly mention ideas of equity in terms of subsidy plans. You started some really interesting subsidy plans for the EBCE. I hope you really work with local community and low income community of their choices and availability of renewable ideas and how to bring in more people of lower income to the subsidy plans of EBCE. I think they're really interesting, good examples for all of us. And I guess that's about all for myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Melissa Yu. Melissa Yu, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, board members. My name is Melissa and I'm with the Sierra Club. And as we speak, we are experiencing only the beginning of our yearly heat waves. And we would like to call on the board to allocate a larger percentage of EBCE's budget to the LDPP. And that would directly benefit frontline communities. Frontline communities have always had the shorter end of the stick, from living in the most polluted parts of the Bay to being the last to be able to take advantage of clean energy transition, and all of this while being stuck in the heat waves without access to air conditioning and also being in utility debt. It's been a hard year, and we hope that EBCE can step up and allocate more towards disadvantaged communities. We hope that you all can use your money to build community energy resilience hubs during PSPS events, build community microgrids, and divert more money for utility debt relief. Let's work together to spend our money in a way that advances equity and also meets community and labor needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jim Lutz. Jim Lutz, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Jim Lutz. I'm a community member in Oakland in Dan Cobb's district. And I want to like to express my appreciation for all the fine programs that EBCE is rolling out in the local development business plan. I think that's great. I also strongly support the issues that the East Bay Clean Power Alliance and the other speakers have brought forward tonight. But in addition to that, I would particularly like to ask EBCE and the board members to work with the community to plan for the equitable, distributed, resilient, sustainable electricity system we all want. This will require working with state legislature and statewide commissions to change the policies and regulations that are impeding East Bay community energy from investing in things like community resilience hubs with solar and storage, on-bill financing for efficiency, resilience, and load flexibility in disadvantaged communities, sunsetting the PCIA along with the other absurd PUC electricity charges, and allowing CCAs to become the distribution system operators. I want us to stop. I mean, EBC is doing great with the tools it has and the things that are available, but I want EBCE, the board members and the community to work to implement the electricity system that we would all like to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Shana Hirschfield Gold. Shana, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Shana Hirschfield Gold, and I'm the climate coordinator for the city of Oakland. In July 2020, Oakland City Council adopted the 2030 Equitable Climate Action Plan. And that plan is a strategy for deeply reducing our greenhouse gas emissions 60% by the year 2030 on a path toward carbon neutrality, and doing that in a deep equity lens in a way that will reduce or eliminate racial disparities across our community and promote equity for the frontline communities who have been so underserved and so deeply and inequitably harmed by the impacts of environmental racism and climate change. EBCE's electrification support is a major strategy for achieving those ECAP goals, including their direct investments, their community grants, and the technical assistance that we've been taking advantage of today, to this day. The City of Oakland has been enjoying technical assistance for electrifying our facilities, as well as electrifying our transportation, and that is work that we could not do without EBCE, and it is work that directly supports building resilience hubs and resilience services across the city. Transportation is 2/3 of our local emissions. And I want to say that transportation electrification is an equity issue. People who live in apartments, renters, those on shared mobility platforms, people who are being poisoned by the emissions from trucks, those are people who need more than anyone for that system to be electrified. If we don't lay the literal groundwork, the charging infrastructure today, those systems are never going to change and people are going to continue being poisoned. Thank you for these investments that you're planning in facility and transportation electrification.
Thank you. Next up, we have David McCord. David McCord, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
This is David McCord. I'm a co-chair of the Sierra Club's San Francisco Bay Chapter Energy Committee. And we, excuse me, want to urge EBCE to focus its budget on helping people, including especially low income and people, to be able to put solar on their and storage on their homes and to buy EVs. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Peeper Power Solar Cooperative. Peeper Power Solar Cooperative, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you. Can you all hear me? Yes, you can. Great. This is Crystal Huang with People Power Solar Cooperative. We are blessed to be one of the recipients of the first and only Community Innovation Grant from the EBCE. Our project specifically highlights communities' ability to drive the energy transition for the wealth, health, and resilience of our community. And the wonderful Community Innovation Grant really allowed us to not only build our second and third community-owned solar, but it also enabled us to develop the crucial resources and tools that will enable communities to organize around the energy transition. So during the grant period, we really witnessed many creative solutions our local communities came up with to address their own energy needs, and our resources emerged from a lot of these great outcomes from your generous support of our work. And this grant also allowed us to understand how much more work is needed in educating our member owners and the communities all throughout the EBC territories to understand our energy system before we can talk about a lot of the things that's related to energy, and they can be a better consumer. And currently we're supporting the Asian Pacific Environmental Network on implementing their youth-led resilience hub at the Rice Center in Richmond. And as described in their recent Resilience Before Disaster report, that's also co-written with the SEIU California and Blue Green Alliance, Resilience Hub will only be beneficial to communities if the community itself has a real sense of ownership in its co-creation, operations, and governance. So we're really here to really urge EBC to be funding and advancing East Bay grassroots energy resilience hubs and community microgrids, regardless of what other outside agency defines as critical facilities. So please give the community a chance to be more than just consumers. They need seed money for innovative solution to build community resilience just as much as they need money for COVID utility benefits. So we value having EBC as our partner. We deeply support East Bay Clean Power Alliance's call for EBC to provide 40% of local development business plan towards equity investments. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lastly, if there are any phone callers in who signed up for public comment, whom I've not been able to identify, if you could please press *9 to raise your hand to identify that I should unmute you. Not seeing anyone raise their hand. Any phone callers raise their hand. That's the last of the public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk, appreciate that. And thank you all to the so very many public speakers we had on our budget item and the focus that they presented. I really appreciate that. I want to bring it back to the board members and see if any board members have any comments or questions of staff based on the public comments. And I'll go now to Vice Chair Diane Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to thank staff for the robust process of bringing the budget before us repeatedly to the committees and to the board, and to signal my support for the transportation electrification investment in the next year's budget, because I'm looking at the US EPA's inventory of greenhouse gas emissions, and transportation is the biggest sector where we can make improvements. It's our low-hanging fruit. And I know there are frontline communities right in my backyard around the Port of Oakland who bear the brunt of heavy-duty diesel vehicle emissions, and those communities who share that fine corridor of that I-80 with me. We all get this in our greenhouse gas inventories when we're trying to make those reductions with our climate action plans. So this work is going to have very real and very direct health impact on these communities. And I also want to thank the CAC for working so hard on trying to put together a framework on metrics for equity. I want to hear everything that the callers have had to say. I think that will be a really useful tool to inform the work that we do going forward. I also want to thank the CAC for considering the budget and recommending it tonight. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Harrison.
Yeah, just so I understand.
Did we lose you, Kate? Are you frozen?
I think she's frozen.
Okay.
Budget on equity programs.
Kate, I'm sorry, Kate, you were frozen for about 8 seconds. So why don't you repeat?
I'm trying to understand the connection between the, I was muted. Was I muted?
You were frozen for about 8 or 10 seconds. So try again.
I'm unfrozen now. I wanted to ask, I think the community board or also Mr. Chassett, is the sense that because we don't have equity metrics, it's not possible right now to set aside some share for equity specific programs. Can't hear you, Nick.
I was on mute there. I wouldn't say that at all. I would say, you know, as we think about the total budget, local development budget, you know, I'd be pretty confident in saying that, you know, 35, 40, potentially 50% of the dollars we're spending would meet, you know, I think fairly broad definitions of, you know, kind of equity metrics. So, I mean, if you think about one sort of core equity metric that, you know, is typically used, and I think is being used, for instance, in our disadvantaged green tariff program, is are the projects being located in state designated disadvantaged communities? So if you think about, say, our electric vehicle charging, you know, we have a real emphasis on siting electric vehicle charging in, you know, adjacent to multi-unit dwellings and in low and moderate income communities. So, you know, I would, you know, expect that a significant portion of our charging is either in a disadvantaged community or, you know, adjacent to and, you know, clearly accessible to folks that live in disadvantaged communities. If you think about, you know, the resilient hubs that we're seeking to support, as I said, you know, it's a fairly small total budget amount from a local development perspective, but it is, you know, tens of millions of dollars of capital expense. So tens of millions of dollars of investment are going to be made through this initiative. These are projects that are going to be on community centers, fire stations, you know, the critical infrastructure that is, you know, open to everybody. And I think that is one, I think, thing that's just also worth noting. To think about Resilient Hub, one of the challenges you run into with public funds and providing public funds to private enterprises for a Resilient Hub is we can't guarantee universal access. Whereas if it's a community center or a fire station, you know, anybody can go there during a you know, a natural disaster and will have equal access and opportunity. So again, we are working on sort of more sort of defined metrics, but I think if you think about where the assets are being deployed and, you know, where the funds are being spent, you know, I would argue, say every dollar we spend in medium and heavy duty transportation electrification will have a direct benefit to disadvantaged communities, and, you know, those dollars should all be considered, you know, to the benefit of frontline communities, because that's where the biggest impacts of medium and heavy duty transportation are felt.
Hey, Nick, can I add something to that?
Sure.
Yeah, Councilmember Harrison, one other thing I just wanted to point out is we're not only doing that with our budget dollars, but the budget dollars that we're bringing in from, say, the state, we are also making sure that that money is targeted towards these types of communities. So an example of that is with the electric vehicle incentive program in the past, 25% of the money needed to be in DACs. And we built a map that we showed the CEC that said, you know, there's affordable housing in DACs and there's also affordable housing outside of DACs. And instead of just giving more money to those projects, we requested that, you know, a large percentage of that funding be required to be in DACs or close to multifamily affordable housing. The CEC, because of our data, made the changes, and now 50% of that funding, including the $14.5 million that the state is providing, has to be, you know, in these multi-unit dwelling hotspots that we have helped to designate, as well as affordable housing that doesn't necessarily sit in the DAC. And so that's, you know, direct change that we're doing, not only for our own dollars, but the dollars that we're bringing into the county, you know, from a state partner.
I hope you'll all come and support our Climate Equity Fund in Berkeley, where we're trying to make funding available to lower income communities for things. So I just have one other question. That's about these community innovation grants, which I think were last offered in 2019. Is that right? It was about $250,000. Is there been consideration given to putting money back into those grants?
So what we kind of elected to propose in this budget is shifting those dollars to grants to community-based organizations to support our AMP outreach. So given the heavy prioritization we have put on supporting utility debt relief, we deemed the use of those community grant dollars would be best put towards supporting that work.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Councilmember Cox.
Thank you. I really appreciate the presentation and I think making an impact in the environment, but also health-wise to make it a better environment for everyone. I applaud East Bay Community Energy on their efforts and designating funds to support those efforts. I think one of the things that it's not clear because I'm still kind of getting transitioned into this board position is a lot of companies and government are setting up a department that is called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, DEI, as they refer to it. And I was curious to find out, do we have a designated group like that with EBCE? Because it would help to be able to measure, but also be accountable for all the things that we're doing to help the disadvantaged communities, but also adding in, are you awarding contracts or identifying where you have big suppliers of power energy, that they're actually including small minority women-owned businesses, LGBT, veterans, you know, and making sure that there's a piece of the pie to be shared in terms of access and equity to be able to partner together. Because we see a lot that can be either set aside or be partnered together with the big and the small companies. And also looking in terms of how, if it's put in contracts, that they can partner and do work, especially hiring local in these disadvantaged areas, that would be a big job, workforce development, and also including that they can be able to partner with community colleges and providing the internships, but also education pieces that can help, you know, the future of a lot of what's happening in the energy field. And so I know with Ohlone College, they've had a lot of wonderful work done with solar farms and getting people trained to be able to know how to install panels within a week, and, you know, within 2 months or so, they can be fully employed to help with some of the development projects that are happening. So I just wanted to get your thoughts, and Nick and team, on if there's some way of some accountability and really, you know, I hear the numbers, it's just kind of following the measurement, following how successful, or how we as elected leaders that sit on this board of directors, how we can partner to help make sure that we're helping to keep the success a success in these disadvantaged and those that don't have access, or they or it's part of the not having the money to make it more equitable.
So I think let me speak to the contract question first. We have some pretty significant limitations around our ability to contract with, say, explicitly contract with a disabled veteran or minority owned business under Prop 209. So under Prop 209, there are provisions that basically prohibit certain preferences in public contracting. While we did support legislation last year to effectively undo Prop 209, that ballot initiative did not pass the vote, and so Prop 209 remains the law of the state of California. We do, and we're actually in the process of updating many of our contracts, but we do actively try to both collect demographic information about all of our contractors. We do have requirements by the state of California to report on our contracting. And so we through that reporting, we are collecting information about the kinds of firms that we're working with, whether it's for power supply or professional services or otherwise. So that is, I think helps provide a measure of what we're doing. And then we are also actually partnering with other CCAs to do more robust outreach. So much of our budget, I would say, if you 85, 89, 90% of our budget goes to purchasing power supply. And so one of the things we're doing with other CCAs is trying to assess, like, are there ways to bring more diverse suppliers or suppliers that have more diverse ownership into the power supply mix? And that's not something that I think one CCA can do. It's really something we're all working on. So I think that's one. I think to your question about kind of a diversity and equity and inclusion department, we do not have a diversity, equity, and inclusion department. As an agency of under 40 people, we have really sort of we kind of have two, I would say, sort of facets of our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We have sort of our internal efforts, which are led by our human resources department. So working on internal diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, from assessing things like our hiring practices and our performance management and generally sort of internal management of the agency. And then we have sort of our external efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And actually, we've been going through over the last year an effort for all of our teams to sort of assess, the different work we can do to enhance our engagement. So for instance, if you think about for our marketing efforts, we've made a large effort this year to significantly increase language and sort of our ability to communicate in language with our customers. So that's just one example. And so there's that as also sort of an external effort, and that's led by actually each one of our functional teams has a kind of a working group focused on sort of external diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that they are working towards. But we don't have a department. It's more, it's part of, we try to sort of look at it as it's part of everybody's work, as opposed to having it be, one department's work. And part of that's just because, we're a 37-person organization. So having a department with multiple people, then you're talking about 10, so we thought it's most efficient just to embed it in the work of the staff who are sort of functionally managing and functionally working day to day in the organization.
Okay. I'm sorry, Teresa, do you have another question, another comment?
Well, I appreciate the information that Nick has shared about data reporting and kind of tracking that. So I guess it's in everybody's, goals for their performance that they are looking to, be able to do the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is that something that's in their performance reviews? Is that how you're managing to achieve that?
Okay. Can I suggest something? I think this is more important. This is much more important than almost an addendum to our budget. I think this is something that should have its own agenda item, and staff should come to the board and say, here are some of the things that we're doing. We'd like some more ideas. And even though it's a small agency, I think small agencies are still engaging in conscious, deliberate diversity, equity, inclusionary actions or efforts. and I think it deserves its own agenda item discussion, maybe next month. That would be my recommendation. If I don't want to minimize it. I think it's extremely important and deserves a serious discussion, more time than we have now as part of our budget. And it's almost 8 o'clock.
I appreciate that, Chair, and I welcome that suggestion to be able to spend more time. It's just that when it was indicating a couple of areas that was hitting, then it kind of expanded into a little bit more. But keeping in line with the meeting agenda, I'm certainly would like to hear some updates and dive into that conversation in a little more detail. So thank you so much for pointing that out.
No, thank you for bringing that up. Very important. Let's see, Councilmember Tiedemann and then Councilmember Lopez.
So first of all, thanks for the presentation. I think especially the point about why we're focusing on electrification in our local development fund is well made, of why that's our focus in reducing emissions. But I also think the point that we had a lot of speakers from the public make is also well made, of that there are some ways that crosscuts with equity concerns, but I would like to see us invest more in that equity-focused community investment, agreeing with Board Member Harrison's earlier point that it seems like we could do more. So I'm going to ask what may seem like some basic questions about budget. I've only gone through this budget process once with my own city, so I'm still getting used to this sort of thing. What is sort of our capability to increase that amount without taking away from anything else? And sort of what would that look like if we tried to put it back there and instead of passing this as is tonight?
Could I thank you, Aaron? I want to add to that question and provide some specificity, although your question is valid on its own and in the broader sense. But let's say, as an example of what Aaron just brought up, Nick, if we, the board, wanted to add, let's say, $500,000 of money that might be unprogrammed right now to the, for example, transportation electrification pot or program area, with an explicit emphasis for that additional $500,000 on low income and BIPOC communities of color, is that $500,000 somewhere where it's doable to do that? Is there some unprogrammed amount of money or that we could peel off $500,000 and put it into here? That's an example, I think, of what Councilmember Tiedemann is saying.
I think there are, probably certainly some funds that we could, we could program additionally into. I think our main challenge, sort of adding funds at this point, tends to be not knowing exactly where we're going to spend them. And, one of our challenges at times has been, just having the staff capacity to kind of intelligently manage and deploy funds. We don't want to just give incentives out without being thoughtful and making sure that we're running a really robust process, and really vetting the applicants and making sure that they are they meet sort of the criteria that the board has set forth, and I think some additional funds in the transportation and electrification to focus on consumer adoption and education certainly could be used. I will say, I think we have tended on the vehicle adoption side to really lean on other organizations that are doing a lot of this work. So for instance, Grid Alternatives is managing a large program for the state of California as part of this Clean Cars for All, where they're actually doing a lot of education outreach and providing, incentives for lower income consumers to adopt electric vehicles. And so I couldn't say today with that particular example, Chair Cal, where we would use the funds. I think, if the will of the board was to say reinstate some community innovation grants, that's, I think, a very sort of straightforward process to say, okay, we could issue, grant solicitations. Now, I do want to be clear, like, we can issue grant solicitations, and there are groups that you know, may be interested in those grants who've spoken to us today, and I can't guarantee that we're going to provide grants to those organizations, right? You know, it has been a sort of a robust process with a lot of groups that have applied, and so I will also say it is quite an extensive effort when you're giving out $50,000, say, of ratepayer funds, and that's really what we're talking about. These are our customers are contributing these dollars. We really got to, you know, make sure we're running a good process, right? And so it is quite an effort. And, you know, if we're going to be running, you know, multiple community grants in addition to our connected communities work, I think we have to sort of think like, all right, well, does that mean we're going to do less? We're going to spend less staff time on the grant making process to community-based organizations for arrearage management. I can't definitively say we're going to have to make that choice, but those are the kinds of choices that we may have to make if we're, you know, kind of co-equally trying to deploy funds for community kind of energy innovation and trying to do all of the work we're trying to do for customer debt relief. I will say that the last point is we think the amount of money we're putting towards community debt relief is sufficient, and we think it is, you know, but we also recognize that, you know, we may go into this process in 3 months or 6 months and find out that, you know, there are more groups that we can partner with. You know, we could spend an incremental $200, even $500,000 in more outreach, and we'll have more impact. And I think that's something that we have previously said, you know, if we're finding ourselves in that position that we don't have enough money for, say, the debt relief work, we would come back to the board and ask for a budget increase. And that's something we've done in the past for programs where we're finding something to be insufficient. We will come back and say, you know, we'd like to add an extra $500,000 to the budget to do more work in that space.
Thank you. I see. Well, I'm sorry, Councilmember Tiedemann, you're still on deck here. So, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for that clarification. You know, I would love to see us put more money into this, but as Nick I think has well pointed out, I'm not sure exactly how I want us to do that or how we best do it, and it is important to do it thoughtfully and with good design. And I empathize with, you know, tossing a huge amount of work back to staff in a limited time, having been on the other side of that equation. So the argument to do this is we may need to expand our budget later if we find that it would be useful. Maybe the right one, but I'd love to hear from others on the board to see if they have other thoughts there.
Thank you. I'm still present. This is your chair, but I have to change devices. So I'm going to ask Vice Chair Martinez to chair the remaining part of the meeting. I'll still be present though. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair Kalb. I have the virtual gavel here. Member Tiedemann, thank you for your comments. I see Member Lopez, who hasn't spoken yet to this item. You are now recognized.
Thank you so much. So I appreciate my colleagues here, you know, and this discussion around equity inclusion. I appreciate also the public that is, to me, in my mind, demanding this. I think it's important that we really focus on this, whether, and so there was a suggestion earlier that this comes back as its own agenda item, which I think would be the thing to do here, so that we could have that robust conversation with bearing in mind that we could do a revision on our budget, and know that that is an option once we are once we're informed of what opportunities may lie. And it is really important for us to continue to focus on the intersectionality of environmental justice and social justice issues. There is an intersection there. I did hear some of the speakers say that if we do stuff for folks that are, you know, car owners, et cetera, that's not really, you know, hitting it on the mark. I would say that what we ought to be doing is focusing twofold, and that is doing that, what I just mentioned, but also direct investments too in communities that are marginalized economically or suffer from environmental justice issues. We have a neighborhood like that called Davis West. It's right off of 880 and Davis, and we have cars on the freeway all day long, polluting their homes. The airport rattles their homes, or is also polluting over their homes, and along with the noise and so forth. So I think that we have to really be sure that we cover the whole spectrum of opportunities, that we shouldn't sort of silo or compartmentalize them, but look at it holistically, that we have to do those that can afford or decide to afford or decide to spend money on cars to really incentivize, like it was discussed earlier. And I thank you very much for staff of going in that direction. But I do think that there is a different reality for folks that are in poverty. And we need to dig a lot deeper and figure out how we can be not only relevant, but impactful. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I will recognize folks who have spoken already. I'll bring it back to Councilmember Harrison.
I was wondering if there's a way to say that we will take this up as a budget item later, but that we give some direction to ask the staff to look at this specifically. I have to tell you what concerns me is the use of the word consumer. It's not just consumers, it's communities, right? We're not just here about the individual that's interacting with us. I think this is partly what Ms. Lopez was saying, Councilmember Lopez. We're here about the communities that are impacted by global climate change. So I think it's just maybe we need to think about it a little bit bigger. So I appreciate the emphasis on the ratepayers who are struggling. We need to keep that emphasis. I appreciate the emphasis on people that are going to be buying an automobile, but it's about something more than that. And I think that's what I'm hearing. So I would like to make two suggestions. One, that we consider putting money back into the community innovation grants, as Mr. Chassett indicated. That was a more straightforward way of doing it. And I think there was a $250,000 allocation at the point in 2019. And then we do that because our ending position is healthier this year. But then we also ask them to come back with a plan for a program for that. And understand that nothing's going to happen until they've had much more opportunity to think about it, because we can't just dump this on them right now. So that's what I would move that we do.
So I'm sorry, Member Harrison, is that a motion to allocate that money in this current budget for the next fiscal?
Yes, with the request that they come, it's almost like it's on reserve, because that's another way to handle this, and say, please come back and talk to us more about this idea, so that we understand it better and we can make a more intelligent decision. But I hate to say, let's just, assume we're going to have the money later. The ending position is healthier. So that would be my motion.
Okay, so that's a motion on the resolution plus $250,000 for community innovation grants, with the staff to come back with us for details on options for programming. Does that encapsulate your motion?
It does.
Very good. Teresa Cox, if you don't mind waiting just a moment, I see Brittany Kick, who hasn't spoken on this item yet. Recognize Member Kick.
My screen is frozen, so I can't see you, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I would like to amend that motion. So it's a friendly amending motion. I think that's a good idea, where we're going back to those grants, but understanding that we might not have the proper staffing to continue these grants long term. And so in that plan, if they could be very specific about if there's a staff need that is going to be needed to maintain this long term. I think the community has let us know that these grants are important. And I get that we can't give people more work without the support to maintain that work long term. So if they come back with that plan, if they could be very specific about if there is a staffing need, so we can look at that carefully so that we can continue to support our communities long term, not just this year. If that would be a friendly amending motion to.
Yes, I accept that. Thank you. It's very thoughtful.
And I'm sorry, was that a second with that amendment?
Yes.
Okay, very good. The chair recognizes Member Hannon from Newark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can't support the motion or the amended motion as presented. I initially agreed with Councilmember Harrison and her suggestion and request that we bring this item back for greater discussion. But before we begin allocating $250,000, I want to know what programs, what services will not be provided as we reallocate those funds. I think we need to have that conversation. As Councilmember Harrison mentioned, we certainly have opportunities to amend our budget at any time in the future as we see fit. So for those reasons, I won't support the motion.
Is that a substitute motion for the resolution?
I make a motion that we support the staff budget as presented.
Okay, so I'll consider that a substitute motion. Is there any discussion or a second on the substitute motion, which is to accept the resolution as presented by the staff?
I'll second
that.
I heard a couple of voices, but I saw the lips moving of Member Cox from Fremont. So we will consider the substitute motion first. I see Chair Kalb wants to add to the discussion. You are recognized.
Could you hear me?
Now we hear you.
Okay, sorry. I apologize. Well, anyway, I'm driving, but I'm pulling over. So I appreciate all the discussion and the suggestion on the motion. I do want, whatever the appropriate wording would be, I would like us to make it clear to the staff that we're looking for you to identify $250,000 or $500,000 or whatever it is in unprogrammed money, in available funds, that is not going to take away from something very specific, to be spent on later this year. Not yet determined what it's going to be spent on, but something that relates to innovation, transportation, electrification, focused on low-income and communities of color. And I think the staff will have to come back to us and say, oh, okay, $250,000, $500,000, and they'll come back to us in a couple of months or whenever and say, here's how we would recommend spending that additional amount of money. We think we could do it, and here's how we would spend it. I want that to happen, whether we adopt it in the budget tonight and set it aside, or whether we just give direction. I feel less concerned, but I do want to see, I do personally support that happening so we could have the opportunity to spend that additional amount of money later in the year.
Can I ask a clarifying question, or should we wait until the vote?
Go ahead.
So these are funds that would not be spent, in relation to any of the work associated with connected communities, right? So we have a $1.1 million. Connected Communities is the, predominantly the arrearage management program, but it's also our Green Tariff Community Solar program, which is going to develop, 5 or so megawatts of solar in disadvantaged communities in Alameda County, as well as work, to support customer signups to the Care and Fair program. So would these grants explicitly not go towards those uses and they would go to other things? Or would you want us to bring forward proposals that would basically, hey, we're going to allocate an additional $250,000 and it could be towards that work that's happening? Because those are all to support disadvantaged communities and communities of color.
So I'm going to give Chair Kalb the opportunity to answer, as he still has the floor. And then I'd like to offer the opportunity to the motion maker after Chair Kalb is done.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Could you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. I'm wearing a mask, sorry. I mean, different board members will have different thoughts about the specificity of what to spend it on. My thought, which is not necessarily everybody else's thought, was to put it in the broad pot of transportation electrification, targeted towards low income and communities of color. I was not giving any more specificity beyond that, asking staff to come back in a couple of months with specificity within that.
Okay.
And I would like to give the floor to Member Harrison, as you made the the motion that encapsulated that pot of money. So
Yeah, it sounds like where we're heading is to say that the staff will come back in a defined period with an idea about how to spend these funds on this kind of program, with an indication of what the staffing implications for them would be in managing such a program. But that we not set aside the funding specifically, but we do give the direction to come back with an idea about a program related. Is that correct? Does that work for you, Councilmember Hannon?
Yes, that works for me. Thank you.
Okay, so why don't we just make that the motion then?
So
I don't know who seconded.
I believe it was Member Cox. If you're comfortable
Yes.
with that.
I am. I appreciate the clarification there. Thank you.
And then one other piece of clarification, I know Chair Kalb had mentioned specifically directing these funds towards electrification efforts that would be targeted towards frontline communities and communities of color. Is that germane to?
Yes, I would want to include that.
Okay, very good. So we have a thank you, colleagues. This is how it's done. We have a motion and a second, and I won't fail to recognize you, Member Narum from Pleasanton, before we take a vote.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question or a clarification that I think when this comes back, that staff indicates where the money is going to be coming from. One of the things that we have not talked about is the reserve and the fiscal sustainability of the CCA. And as I understand it, the reserve is not at the midpoint of our stated policy. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. And so I'd like to see when this comes back, you know, there should be some updates to the budget as far as how we're doing, particularly against the potential risk items that were identified in the budget. And, you know, make sure we don't have problems and things. But I think it's important that we also get, you know, we work to get the reserve up to the midpoint that we have specified as a policy, so that we ensure the fiscal sustainability of this organization or this agency. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Member Narum. Chair Kalb, I know you are on your mobile device. You still have your hand raised, and I just want to offer you the floor if you need to speak again, or
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, very good. So we have a motion by Member Hannon, a second by Member Cox to approve the resolution as presented, with direction to bring back this item on $250,000 for community innovation grants targeted at low-income communities of color, and a broad definition of intersectionally challenged residents in our communities. So that is the motion, and I will turn it over to the clerk to please call the roll.
Madam Vice Chair, just a point of clarification, if I may.
Yes.
Was that motion by myself or Member Harrison?
That is
actually mine.
It's the substitute motion is heard first. If
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're muted, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, I'll call the roll on Director Hannon's motion. Alameda County. Albany.
Sorry, can you clarify one more time which motion we're voting on right now?
We're voting on the substitute motion, and it is to pass the resolution for the budget as presented by staff. And it also includes that staff is directed to bring back an item proposing a budget amendment for $250 into the community innovation grants.
Cool, thank you. Yes.
Berkeley.
Yes.
Dublin.
Yes. Yes.
Fremont.
Yes.
Hayward.
Yes.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Yes.
Piedmont. Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro.
Yes.
Tracy, Union City,
Yes.
Emeryville,
Aye.
Oakland.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Passes unanimously amongst those present. Thank you to all of the advocates who came to speak tonight. Thank you for my colleagues for a robust discussion. This is, I think, a really good blend of being able to pass a budget this evening, which is very important. And then hear further on this item, which is of concern to many in our community and on the board. So thank you, everyone. That'll bring us to our next item. This is the ZEV 2030 resolution, which is attached to our agenda packet. And I will turn it over to staff to present on this item.
Yes, the ZEV resolution. So this is a resolution that was recommended by a number of you board members that your cities have been that have adopted, and it would seek to accelerate California's ZEV mandates to achieve our goals 5 years earlier. So our current mandate, I believe it's for 1.5 million ZEVs is by 2035, and this would seek to accelerate that to 2030. Or I'm sorry, it's 100% of ZEV sales by 2035, and it would accelerate it such that by 2030, all vehicles sold in the state of California are zero emission.
Very good. Thank you for that brief presentation. The chair recognizes Chair Kalb.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martinez. Yes, a number of cities and at least one CCA around the state has already passed this resolution or very similar resolutions. There's a statewide campaign underway to really push ourselves and our state to plan better or do more to get us to really focus on getting ZEVs, zero emission vehicles, which is mostly but not exclusively electric vehicles, really on the roads to the extent that people are buying new vehicles, and really by 2030 kind of phase out the sales of our traditional internal combustion engine and try to do the best we can to have as many sales as possible, when there are sales of cars, to be zero emission vehicles. And so I know there's at least one person in the queue to speak who is involved in this campaign, and I'm hoping EBCE will join MCE and several cities around the Bay Area in adopting this resolution. So I'm happy to make the motion to adopt the resolution as presented.
Very good. Thank you. The chair recognizes Member Hannon from Newark.
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. For the reasons that are articulated by Board Chair Kalb, I will second that motion.
Very good. Thank you. Before we continue any further discussion, let's go to public comment. I will leave it to our clerk to call anyone who has submitted a speaker card, and then folks who have their hands raised, and to remind people to be recognized, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or if you're calling in, please press *9.
Yes, we have 3 speakers signed up: Jada Dogon, Peter Myers, and Alita Dupree. I am recognizing Jada Dogon for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, Jada again with Local Clean Energy Alliance. I have a question about this resolution. So the title says zero emission vehicles and environmental justice. Could you tell us the names of environmental justice organizations that are part of this coalition? Because I checked their website, but I haven't seen any familiar names. And as like many of us mentioned in our previous comments, EBC already spends a huge part of the LDBP budget for EV charging infrastructure program. And we said we would like EBC to invest in programs that would bring energy resilience and economic benefits to communities most in need. So my second question is, what does passing this resolution mean? Does it mean that EBC will spend more money on programs like EV charging infrastructure in the future? So thanks. So these are my 2 questions.
Thank you. Next up, we have Peter Myers. Peter Myers, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Peter Myers. I'm with the organization ZEV 2030. We're a nonprofit focused on creating a statewide 2030 goal that, as Mr. Chassett said, 100% of new car sales in California would be zero emissions vehicles. I'm glad that, sorry, I don't have her last name, but that Jada asked some questions about what the budget impact would be. No city so far has, this is a resolution calling for state action. This is not affecting EBCE budget or the city of any, or the budget of any city that would then pass, that, you know, if folks wanted to take this back to your cities, as some of you already have, and pass a measure, it would have no budget impact. This is actually, the way that we've designed this is actually to advocate for more state funding, so that dollars come in from the state locally to EBCE, to cities, so that funding, so that there is the ability to do the important work of increasing access to public charging for folks in multi-unit dwellings, that there, and for, you know, low-income folks to have subsidies to buy new or used zero-emission vehicles. Luckily, Mr. Chassett outlined already a lot of the benefits while talking about the budget, so I don't feel the need to necessarily preach to the choir for the benefits of ZEVs. I will say that the cities of Oakland, Berkeley, and San Leandro have all passed these measures, led by Chair Kalb, Councilmember Harrison, and Councilmember Lopez. And individual board members, including Councilmember Marquez and Vice Mayor Kumagai, and the Alameda County Democratic Central Committee have all supported this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm recognizing Alita Dupree. Alita Dupree, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Martinez. Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. This is a very important resolution and a good resolution. I don't have a car, but hope if I were to buy a car, I would definitely buy a zero emission car. And I hope that I can rent a zero emission car. I wish the rent-a-car companies would get on this because I want to participate in improving the present and the future. And this is necessary for California because California had to get in front of this decades ago because of interesting things like temperature inversions in the Los Angeles basin. I'd often ride buses down to LA and see steel gray skies from the smog. So legislative and community advocacy is an essential part of this organization. And I go to many meetings, including yours, where we have legislative items on the agenda that we support or oppose and keep an eye on. So I certainly believe that this is doable, and we have to start somewhere. And I don't know if we're going to make that goal in 10 years, but by doing something, we're going to get there. And especially when I see surpluses of renewable energy that's being curtailed, some of that could be used in cars. And the investments in this infrastructure are going to put people to work in their communities. People need jobs, good paying jobs. These are trade jobs, union jobs. So this is also a way to get people to work here in our local community and in our state and in our nation. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers for this item.
Thank you. That'll conclude public comment. I will bring it back to my colleagues for discussion. Colleagues, if there are any comments or questions on this item, we can go ahead and entertain those now. Otherwise, I'd be happy to entertain a motion and a second.
I think we have a motion and a second, Madam Chair.
My apologies. We have a motion by Member Kalb, Chair Kalb, and a second by Member Hannon. I'll turn to the clerk to please call the roll.
Great, thank you. Alameda County. Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley. Berkeley. Dublin.
Yes.
Fremont.
Yes.
Hayward.
Yes.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Yes.
Piedmont. Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro.
Yes.
Tracy. Union City.
Yes.
Emeryville.
Yes.
And Oakland.
Yes.
Oakland.
He said yes.
Yes. The motion passes.
Motion passes unanimously amongst those present. Thank you, colleagues. That'll bring us to item 15. This is board member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future board agendas. Do I have any takers? Member Kalb.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for chairing the remaining part of this meeting. We appreciate it. Yeah, well, the thing that we brought up earlier that Councilmember Cox brought up, a budget, I'm not sorry, not a budget item, a agenda item that really discusses what the staff and the organization is or can do as it relates to the category of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, staff will decide when they're ready to bring it forward, but I think I'd like to see that happen in the next few months. So that's one thing to Nick. And then I would just make an announcement that this Saturday, as everybody knows, is Juneteenth. So we should all be celebrating in our very respective communities. And in case you didn't hear, the United States Senate has passed unanimously the resolution or law to make Juneteenth a national holiday. So that's very exciting. Never would have thought that would happen unanimously, but it did. And I'm quite sure the House is going to go along with it. So that's very, very exciting news for all of us.
You have a lot of confidence in our House of Representatives, Chair Kalb. I think there were a few of them who demurred. Member Kick.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what I had talked about earlier. I know that we've been talking about how, we're a small organization now, but we are planning on growing. And one of the things I would like to see staff think about and bring to us are suggestions on areas of growth in which we can support our local communities and our local development projects, expand that team in a way that prioritizes mentorship and growth of new communities and creating jobs for people in those communities who may be willing to do this work and working with our CAC to do that. So I think there's really a good opportunity for innovation and creating a good job within our own organization to support those communities directly. And this is a long-term plan. This isn't like, let's do this tomorrow, but I think our community who spoke to us tonight made it very clear that they are willing and ready to serve if we provide them the opportunities, whether that looks like a internship program or something like that. I would like that to be something that we have the opportunity to consider moving forward.
Very good. Can we put that under the umbrella of workforce development, Member Kick?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. And without objection from my colleagues, we'll go ahead with that and with the diversity, equity, and inclusion suggestion made by Member Kalb. And thank you for bringing that up, Member Cox. Member Hannon, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. I absolutely agree with Board Chair Kalb and Ms. Kick on their comments regarding future action items, but I want to make sure we're sensitive to the workload of staff. As I heard the CEO indicated, there's like 37 staff members. At some point, as we board members continue to put items that we would like discussed and brought forward for future discussion, it does impact staff. So maybe what I would ask Madam Vice Chair in the future, as we add items for the staff to examine and present to us, that they keep kind of a running list of what those items look like and kind of a timeline as to when they think they might be able to bring it back, so that as we add items at future meetings, we have a discussion about, these are all the items that we've asked you to look into and review. Is that still manageable, or do we need to re-examine and reassess, those workload items? Just a thought for us to be considerate of staff in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hannon. I think that's a reasonable request to keep the board updated as to the progress of these items and the capacity and bandwidth of staff. Are there any other comments or suggestions for future items? Seeing none, I would like to bring one up, and this is it is that time of year where we review our CEO. So I'd like to have a closed session item on our July meeting for the board to just discuss our regular performance review. We're not pulling this because anything specific happened. This is just the time of year when we do this. So we'll do that on the 6th. And with the board's indulgence, I still have the same Google form I used the last time we did this. I found it very effective, and I will be sending that out individually to the board members and to the directors for a 360 review of those direct reports to Nick. Unless anyone has any objection, please let me know now, but that's the procedure we'll follow. And I'll make sure that Chair Kalb has a review of all of the questions as well before those are distributed. So if anyone has any comments on that or issues, you can let me know now, or you can reach out to me via email, and I'd be happy to address your concerns. But Member Kick, go ahead.
You have a question. So this is my first review of someone on a board. So we participate. What role does the CAC play in any of the review processes? And this can be an offline answer if staff could if somebody could let me know what that looks like. Do they play a role at all? Do they get to do that survey, for example?
I can't remember off the top of my head when we did this process last. Mary, do you remember if I had you participate in the survey?
It sounds familiar, but for the life of me, I can't remember if I did or not. I'm sorry. I can look back to see if I have evidence of it.
Yeah, the short answer is, Brittany, is I may have asked the chair of the CAC to participate in this process, and I may have called her and given informal feedback to the board, but that's something I'm happy to include, and I will just provide that as a caveat that our community advisory committee chair is a non-voting member, so I'll just make note of that when we meet again, and I'm reporting back to the board.
Awesome, that would be great. Just want to make sure, even though she's non-voting, that we still get that community input.
Very good, well noted, and I'll make sure to do that. Thank you. All right, colleagues, if there's no further comment, happy Juneteenth to everyone this Saturday, and thank you so much for your participation tonight, and we will see you in June. It's 8:34 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.